music right now. No fading out. Just abrupt crashing out of the the music there. How y'all doing? Today's not Tuesday. I know. It's a special day. A special unique type of stream. A battle that's been in the works for quite some time. Let me move my thing down. Today is a day of immature feuding and just plain fun, mostly. At least on my part. I don't know if Malcolm's preparing. I don't know if Malcolm's getting ready. Get a little louder. I'm a little mouse, a little quiet like a mouse. Okay, let me raise my volume up a little bit. How's that sound? That sound good? All right, cool. So, we are going to get started momentarily on a little debate. To give you some background on this debate, Malcolm, GoddamnitMalcolm, who we've circled around each other for many a moon now, covering different topics that overlap a lot of the time. Watched on a stream my second video ever. The second one I ever put out. The Evil Races Are Kind of Boring video. And in this video, it kind of incensed him a little bit. He was a little tilted by it. And he had some very clear objections to what I was talking about. And in the process, we were talking, discussing, and analyzing. And I realized that, wait a second, there's a lot going on here. There's enough, one might say, for a bit of an argument, a bit of a fight, a bit of a war. Boost this up right here. It's too big. I don't like that. There we go. That's good. In the process, I realized we may have a little discussion, a little debate, a little back and forth. And 'twas many years ago. Yeah, it's actually kind of funny going back to those old videos because you can see how much my style has changed over time. So the question becomes, where do I still stand on that discussion? Now, mind you, that video was actually birthed from a controversy on Twitter, where I posted on Twitter the Evil Races were kind of boring. That the Cenobites, they're not really all that bad. They're more alien. They're more distorted, confused, twisted. And people got really incensed by that. Malcolm got incensed too. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a discussion with Malcolm, with GoddamnitMalcolm, and talk about some horror movies, talk about some scary stuff, some evil races, it's a debate, so it's going to be semi-formal. We'll discuss the rules when I jump on. I'm right now waiting in Malcolm's green room. When I give the signal, I can let him know I'm ready to go. I'll give him a signal right now, actually, and jump right in. 1 second. I'm going to send him a little message here. Let me in. There you go. That's good. Very coherent. I left a very sophisticated message for Malcolm. But once he's in, I can boost up his icon and we can go from there. But until then, let's talk a little bit. Now, Sai's listening to both of us at once, which is kind of wild, I'm not going to lie. You'll mute one of you when one of you start yapping. That's valid. That's a good point. I also have Malcolm's chat up here as well, so we can take a look at everything at once. I'm going to pop out both chats. I'm going to plug them so you can see them both. So you can see them both right here. Yeah, you can see one right here. This is Malcolm's chat. And then, just to make things more confusing, let's pop out this chat as well. And right next to it is my chat. How's that sound? How's that look? That doesn't look at all like a colossal mess, does it? I guess you really can't see this at all, so I'm going to get rid of that. There we go. Just good old alien. Good old alien face.
Talking shit about me, Anthony. I'm right here.
Oh, excellent. I can add you now on Discord. Discord. I can add you now on OBS. I have your little icon. I downloaded it. You're right there in the corner.
Beautiful. That's so cute. I have your chat open, so I'm just making sure that everybody's behaving.
Oh, good. Actually, let me adjust your chat so it's under your face. And I'll move my chat so it's under my face. And so everyone knows where everyone stands. It's perfect. It's excellent. So,
excellent. I also put my Catholic on Catholic violence on screen as well.
Excellent. We need that.
So do you want me to send that to you? You can have it if you want it.
I may need that, actually. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Okay. Just in the center right here. Send me over Discord.
Hang on, let me...
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I'll send it on. I'm going to put it in here.
Am I having a stroke? Probably. That's probably what's happening on the chat.
Okay, just checking. Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'm sending that in the chat. You can have the Catholic on Catholic violence. Krim made that for me.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. I love it. This is
So
perfect.
so you can
Let
have
me just
that.
save that real quick. Oh, hang on.
Yeah, it's
You
really
saw
it's really
my
important. Yeah.
you saw my downloads there for a second. All my random folders from yesteryear. It's terrible. For thumbnails. It's all I download on here. 1 second. Let me get this up. So while I'm getting this set up, Malcolm, to my audience who may not know who you are, mind introducing yourself?
Oh, I would be so delighted, Anthony. I'm
Excellent.
GoddamnitMalcolm. Sometimes FT Mongoose, depending on my vibe. And I just like doing drama commentary and slop. I occasionally like to talk about media stuff, but not in like a serious capacity. Like I do greatly enjoy movies and TV shows and talking about that, but not in like a video essay way. Like I don't sit down and make videos and stuff like that. But occasionally I'll yap on stream about mostly horror movies. That's kind of my preferred genre. So
There we go. And this is hilarious. What was I gonna say? But yeah, no. So you have a lot of experience with the horror genre, so I suspect this is going to be a very. Oh no! Chat enjoys the Catholic on Catholic violence commentary there. But no,
good, good, good.
so excellent. Now I'm going to pour myself some tea. If you have a beverage at home, now's your time to pour some. I have given up the alcohols for Lent. Now I want to talk about the terms of the debate in terms of how we're going to structure it, as well as how we're going to respond to super chats. Super chats we're going to read between periods in the debate so we can like have time to talk. We don't want to interrupt the flow of thought. Just answer supers.
Good idea. Let me mute mine really quick. I'm gonna follow the same rules because I don't want to be interrupted. So you guys can still give me money, but I'm just gonna mute my notifications
But
just so it doesn't interrupt. Great idea.
Yeah. But we're gonna answer them between because there'll be natural stopping points, and we'll take that time just to look at super chats and all that. And if you have a question for us, you can ask it through super chats. What I feel a good idea will be also is to give us both a chance to talk and say our piece, and then shout over each other to interrupt each other as we're talking, because we're both the kind of people who can sometimes have a hard time not talking. So I feel like it's good to have that structure in place. Otherwise, we'll be talking over each other and we're trying to make our core points. That being said, though, I am going to read Pint of Guinness's super chat here. Ant V Malcolm, when will the fist start flying? Probably soon, I imagine.
You can come and visit whatever you want, Anthony. I'm not afraid.
Oh, hell yeah, let's do it. I'm excited. This is fun. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all of this is in good fun, but I will win this.
We'll see.
We'll see. I don't want to.
Don't Icarus yourself. Don't Icarus yourself.
That's
Humility is a good characteristic.
That's the problem. The moment that like you start saying, "Oh, I'm going to be amazing, it's going to be fantastic," that's when you lose. That pride cometh before the fall every time.
Amen, brother.
No
Amen.
exception there. So,
stupid, really unrelated Catholic question, really quick. Do you do no meat on Fridays during Lent?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah,
some people don't do that, but so I was just curious.
Well, you don't count fish as meat, right?
No, I eat fish on Fridays, but I also fast on Fridays, and I don't eat meat on Fridays either.
You see, I usually skip lunch on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. That's usually my day of not eating anything because I'm too much of a gluttonous pig to not eat on Fridays regularly. Plus, like I tend to pass out very easily, like a Victorian frail child. So if I don't have nutrients, I might physically just fall over and in the middle of some like important task, like driving. That's not a good thing to do that while driving.
No, certainly not. Certainly not.
Yeah, no. Okay, one more super chat. I'm going to read them, then I'm ready to get started. Oh, actually, there's two more right here. One's from Krim. Jacked Thorso, thank you for the super chat. Getting settled in for Dark Girl Time. Oh, yeah, this is Dark Girl Time. We're ready for that.
How fucked up, Jack Thorso? You're usually in my chat. Oh, my God. This is already fucked. This is already fucked.
So's Krim. Krim's in my chat, too. It's great. I'm swaying your audience. I'm kidding.
So fucked up. You guys.
Krim, thank you for super chat. Typical trans man making an Icarus reference.
True.
Oh, here's a question actually for you, Malcolm. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it all the same. A Pint of Guinness is asking, has Malcolm seen the Suspiria remake? That dance.
That was the one that came out in like, oh fuck, what year was that?
2018, I want to say 2019. I think it was on
I have
Amazon.
I have to look at the cover of it. That's how I can tell.
Yeah, it was done by the same guy who did Challengers, and has Dakota Johnson in it.
Oh, I think I saw like the first half an hour of this and I fell asleep. I'm so
Mm.
sorry. I'm
And it's
so
funny.
sorry.
Me and my spouse were just talking about that movie, and we are both like saying in hindsight, we were surprised how much we liked it because that first Suspiria is so fantastic and so unusual and so interesting. And what I love about that remake is it was so different and so unlike the original film, yet yet it still felt it was like it took so many changes and diverged so much. You didn't feel like it was tripping over the old one's shoes. Stylistically, it was more plot heavy, more character focused, more mood and atmosphere, whereas the original is very like cinematography colorful and like bright, and there's so much going on in terms of the visual like sensory. The music of that is so intense. I thought they were both so distinct. It still hit that same note of like real sensory, like overwhelming, like I'm not phrasing it correctly, but you get the idea.
Yeah, it was just a little difficult for me to get into.
It is slow. It is very slow.
I'll probably watch it and actually pay attention, but Yellow Jackets and Severance have been taking up all of my time right now. So
Valid. And
maybe when I have a moment of brevity.
oh yeah, and that's one thing I haven't done. I haven't done Severance or which is funny because I've actually been in a video about Severance, but I haven't actually finished Severance or even started it yet. Um,
Ah,
but
shame.
I haven't seen Yellow Jackets yet. But
Oh,
I've seen
phenomenal.
clips of Yellow Jackets and I've seen clips of Severance, but I don't count that as
Well, that's
seeing
not
the
true.
show.
This season fucking sucks so far,
Oh,
but I don't
Severance
know.
or
There's
Yellow
still a
Jacket?
Yellow Jackets. There's
Oh,
still a chance they might be able to save it, but they're 5 episodes into a 9 episode season, and it's just been like dragging.
oh, that
It's like
sucks.
it's like you guys have wasted so much fucking time. So I mean, there's a chance for it to turn around, but it's like I don't know. You guys are wasting a lot of fucking time lollygagging. You know?
Which sucks. And that's unfortunate because like when a good show loses its core, it just yeah, this isn't it just loses track and it just sucks. It meanders too much. All
Hmm.
right, so there's a
You're
couple
right.
more super chats. Let's read some of ours, then we'll just jump into the first topic. Do you want to do that?
Yep, that sounds good.
All right, cool. Let's just. I think you just got one too. I'll read mine after you read yours.
Mine is from Jack Thorso. Thanks for coming back to me, you fucking traitorous swine. Um, Ant got his super chat. Now you get yours. Have a tip for both of my faves. Thank you, Jack Thorso. But I am watching you. You're on my list now.
Valid. All right. So I got a few right here. We'll read them real quick, then we'll get started. Baichi Odera, thank you for super chat. Easy to pass out crew, assemble. Yeah, there we go, exactly. The Victorian girl collective right there, passing out in front of a dramatic wind throws us asunder. Angels Art and Gaming, thank you for super chat. I'm more into horror games than movies. What is your favorite horror game? Mine's still Silent Hill and Silent Hill 2. Not yet played the remake. Do you want to take that one first, Malcolm?
Um, I have to be honest. I don't love horror games. I'm more of a movie person. I did
Mm.
play Amnesia, and I actually quite liked that. So right now, I need a new Xbox because my Xbox sounds like it's going to blow up, and I don't particularly love PC gaming. So I want to play Amnesia. I think that I can get it on the Switch, actually, if I remember correctly. I could be totally wrong on that, but that was probably my favorite one that I played. I really enjoyed that.
I think it is available on Switch, so you should be good there. For me, Silent Hill 2 is like such a classic. The first horror game I ever played, I have a bias for, even though I think the remake of it is much better, and that's Resident Evil, the first one. I think 2 is also better as well, and 4 and 8. I'm biased with 8 because there's elements to that game that I quite enjoy. Quite large elements of Resident Evil 8 I quite enjoy. But yeah, no, I think if I'm going with like an absolute one best one, I gotta say Silent Hill 2, but also Soma. Like Soma really sticks with me in ways that I realize more in hindsight how much that's lingered with me. And I believe that's by the same guys who did Amnesia, I think, right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
I only played The Dark Descent, so I want to play the rest of them.
yeah.
Um,
Varying quality, I'll
like
say.
I said, I think that they're available on Switch, so I think that's what I'm going to go for. Just because I can't afford a new Xbox right now, and mine I could take it apart and try and clean it, but I feel
Mhm.
like that's a mistake because I'm sure I would fuck it up, and then I'll be really pissed if it's like broken. So
Yeah, when it comes to PC repair, I always get nervous. The most I can do is clean it, like with a like an air pump thing.
yeah,
But I get
like an
nervous
air
with those.
compressor or like
Yeah,
Galaxy Gas, we got to get your whippets in.
yeah,
I also clean
exactly.
my computer in between my whippets. Yeah, I
There we
agree.
go.
Best
Uh,
way to do it.
oh, another one too, Dino Crisis, which by the way, Capcom has recently re-upped their license for the name, the trademark for the name Dino Crisis. So I'm hoping there's a new Dino Crisis game coming out soon. One last one on my end, and you have two more on mine, and you have two more on yours. Thoughts on the Terrifier series? I love it myself. I feel like from Pint of Guinness, I think that's going to come up into the debate later, so I'll hold off on that one for now. And Baichi Apiodera, Ant just needs to remember to avoid heresy. And I'm a Victorian maiden, thank you. fair enough. All right, you got a couple lingering on your end, then we'll get started.
Cool. Soma, I can put that on my list. I do want to play through Amnesia first. I'm very methodical in the way that I like to play games. So I will do that first. And then Wave Runners, thanks for the $2. I appreciate your loyalty. You're also on my list though, but just keep up the good work. You're doing great. Thank you.
Valid. All right, so let's get started with the debate formally. Now, I think if we're going to be talking about evil races and evil of that nature, I think the first thing we should talk about is how we define evil. And how we define what's the definition of evil, what we think of when we think of as an evil race, just to make sure we get our cards on the table as to what we're talking about when we discuss everything that follows. So I'll let you take the first round. Remember, you can just say whatever you want. I might cut you off if you go on for like 5 minutes straight, but I think we can keep it like fairly concise in this part.
Brevity is my favorite thing in the entire fucking world, so
yeah.
No worries. So I am just gonna read off of what I said in the group chat, and then if you want to torture this one or augment whatever you dislike about it, that's completely fine. So the two big overarching questions, part of it is obviously in relation to the Cenobites, because that's the Cenobites and Deadites are the two that I think of right off the top of my head. But so the first one are when we're talking about are evil races lazy writing, that's a question for later, but establishing what I think of an evil race would be something that is void of rationality or morality, more so morality, because you can have a rational chaos, rational disorder, or rational violence, or maliciousness. More so the idea of void of morality, in the sense that we understand that killing somebody unjustly is wrong, and that their only goal or intention is to kill, hurt, torture, or cause chaos to human beings specifically, or humanity. And they can't be rationalized or reasoned out of whatever thing they want to do. So for in the context of Cenobites or even Deadites, their goal is to just fuck shit up. And you couldn't sit down and be listen, this isn't cool. How would you like it if I did this to you? They can't be rationalized out of it. It's just innate to that species of entity, right?
Okay, that's a fair point. I think where I differ is how I define evil as the intent to cause harm. Knowing that you're going to cause harm, knowing that it's going to cause pain, and not for any ulterior purpose. So that excludes predators, for example. Not the predators from the movie Predator, but something that preys on something else. It will have to cause harm, but it causes harm to survive. It has to be harm that's superficial in some way. Harm that doesn't really feel like it feels like it's unnecessary. There is a peaceful route. There's a non-violent route. There's a route that doesn't cause pain psychologically or physically. I think that also evil is a choice in many ways. To enact evil, there has to be a way to choose to do good. There has to be the option for a thing to choose the right path, but chooses not to. Because I think evil inherently is very petty in that sense. I think another thing too, but when it comes to hardwired evil races in that regard, since evil is hardwired in their DNA, it has to be a genetic or real ingrained in some fashion, either through bloodlines or through some type of magical alteration or corruption, that the default approach should be to cause harm. And as not to say prey on something else, to feed or to sustain, let's say you build your weapons from the bones of your adversaries. That's not really evil if you take bones. That's just, that's how you build your equipment. Hypothetically speaking, of course, if you're a malicious fungus, survival by grafting onto a living creature and being a parasite on it, that's not evil. That's just your survival mechanism. Evil would have to be something that causes harm either out of a sense of aggression, either out of a sense of sadistic glee, and they have to be able to differentiate between right and wrong, I think. Because while chaotic, and I'm not saying they can't be that they're not something you can't rationalize around, but rather they have to know the difference between good and evil to make the choice to do evil, in my opinion.
So I'm going to torture your definition a little bit.
Go
So
for it.
when you say intent to cause harm with no ulterior purposes, I agree with that,
Hmm.
right? So it's not like for example in Last of Us, like the fungi doesn't have a conscious choice, right? It
Hmm.
just kind of like does its thing.
Exactly.
However, I would say that harm out of aggression and sadistic pleasure, I agree with that, and knowingly differentiating right from wrong because they're operating in a mortal plane. I would add that caveat where like maybe in like their universe, like their behavior is good to them, but operating on a mortal plane, like our perspectives to their behavior, I would consider that to be important. And then I want to tease out more what you mean by like evil seen as a choice, because necessarily speaking, if we're talking about evil races, there is no choice involved. It's an intrinsic characteristic. So do you think that it's possible for like an entity itself to be evil? So if I was to get out a Ouija board and I conjured a demon and the demon's only goal was to like torture you to death, would you say that because that demon doesn't have a choice because its purpose is to torture, like would you say that that is not an evil entity?
Well, that's an interesting question too, because you'd have to, because that also gets into the Catholic question of whether or not a demon has the choice to be redeemed or not, or a devil or what have you. And I think that an evil entity like that is so evil because it chooses to do harm. In the case of a demon or a devil, or what I know is going to come up later, the pure blood Sith, um, they are corrupted by the darkness around them in some fashion, be it the dark side of the Force or the malicious choices of the demonic plane or some variety, some element therein, and that drives them and kind of exacerbates their drive to do harm. It kind of takes the choice away from them, but at the same time, it does. They are basically harbingers of pain and suffering. So,
Well, I don't want like a percentage like value to this or whatever, but
oh
how
yeah.
much would you like weigh the actions over like the choice to do said action? So for example, if I take
Mm-hmm.
the example of let's say a Cenobite that used to be a human.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a Cenobite that used to be a human, obviously there is still a conscious choice to like participate in what Leviathan wills. But regardless of their intention of the choice, the actions that are carried out would be considered evil to the person that's suffering the actions, especially if they don't have the option to choose Leviathan. They are only tortured because they're not worthy of Leviathan.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you draw that line to say that, like, regardless of choice, the action itself is evil, and how much weight are we putting on the action versus, like, the intent?
Okay, so that's actually a really interesting question. So I think for me personally, evil is more the motivation behind the action more than the action itself. That's where I drew the line that I think a lot of people had issue with, because you can do something that is from an objective, I hate to say objective, but from our human mortal perspectives, abhorrent. But to something that's like on a grand scale, it's nothing. I use the example, using the example of, I'll come back to the Cenobites in a bit because I feel there'll be a crux of my later argument, but an example that comes to my mind is the Lovecraftian elder gods or outer gods or what have you. To them, humanity is, they're like ants, they're not even ants, they're like mites on your eyelash. They're so tiny and insignificant and meaningless, and if, like, let's say you scratched your eye and you killed a couple mites, you wouldn't care. So to an old one, scratching the eye, so to speak, and eradicating a whole continent, it's like, well, that's to them is like bumping and killing an ant. You wouldn't be evil for killing an ant. So intention, I think, is very important. That being said, the horror of a good story sometimes depends on that force causing untold horror. What's so frightening, I think, about the old ones is that they are not inherently evil. They're purely indifferent. And that indifference is so dangerous. So the action causes destruction, but that's all relative to the perspective of who's doing it, I think. I'm not, does that answer your question? I'm not sure.
A little bit. So I guess like what I'm looking at is because when I'm evaluating the question of like whether or not a race is evil, I'm operating in the paradigm of like what would be considered evil from like a
Mm,
humanistic perspective or like a human experience, right? Because if we put ourselves in the shoes of like an evil entity of some sorts, they are justified endlessly in what they choose to do because they believe it's right.
mm,
And even to like drag it a little bit to a more realistic example is like even if you look at like people that we would use colloquially to say that they are in fact evil, like Hitler. Hitler genuinely was like, no, dude, like I'm fixing the fucking economy. Like, let's go. Like, we're building the Autobahn. Like, let's go. Because you can rationalize evil or evil actions, per se, to the ends of the earth. But when you look at it from a humanistic perspective, there is a line that is drawn where we say that the action itself, regardless of intent, is still a malicious action, even if it's negligent in nature. So when I'm looking specifically at evil races, you keep bringing up the idea that there's like indifference versus a choice versus motivation, and so where we're gonna like have to split hairs is gonna be like the morality of the follow through of the action versus the intent of the action. Because I would say to a Cenobite, we are, you know, as a Cenobite, I'm giving you access to these pleasures that are foreign to you and your kind and your plane, but these are great delights and these are great privileges and of our kind. Even though we would look at that and say that's fucking evil and disgusting, why would you ever do that? It has to come from a certain perspective. So would you say that you want to take the perspective of the entity or the species itself, or would you rather take the route of looking at it from a human perspective as somebody who's engaging with the entities?
For me, okay, so a couple things that you said there, I'll come back to, but I want to address your main point first. But I'll address the other things after the fact. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, it's purely from the entity's perspective because the way I made my video initially, it was purely from the perspective of writing these types of characters, from creating these types of characters, from reading about these kinds of characters. And that requires getting in their headspace, seeing it from their perspective. There is a big distinction I am going to bring up later, and that is to say the nature versus nurture kind of angle to it all. Like whether or not you're hardwired to be evil or if society or if you're in a society that twists and contorts your perspectives. I think that's where the distinction between where we split hairs about evil races gets really interesting. But I'll get to that in a second. I'll get that later because that's going to come up. I guarantee much later. But for the baseline, I'm approaching it from the perspective of these entities. Do they see it as causing harm? Do they see it as the willful desire to cause harm? That's the key element for me. But I want to point out one thing that I want to just push back against slightly, and that was the idea of the Hitler comparison. A person like that does think that is causing harm. Even the thing is, their harm is more out of hatred towards a population. That a lot of his actions were derived from the idea of creating a scapegoat to direct hatred. He was very aware that by directing people's animosity and anger towards specific people, he can get away with whatever he wanted, and he could push for his own particular goals. I would count that as a very evil action. The idea that you are willfully cause, even though you justify your actions in your head, and this will come back, I'm sure, in discussion, he justified his own actions in his head by dehumanizing the targets of his violence. He didn't say, this is a good thing. He was more like, these are unimportant, undesirables, and I want them gone. He never saw himself as being good for that. He saw it as he dehumanized them. He removed their humanity. He tried to position himself as in a position where these people were lesser and he was above them. And I think that is an act of evil. It's not quite the same thing as like an entity looking at something that's it's like technically very, very tiny, very different from themselves. So I think one factor that we're going to come up against as well afterwards is whether or not these entities have kinship to humanity, or if they're so far gone in a different level of evolution or the cosmology of the universe that they're just conceptually in a different place. And then it's like the question of motivation. To use the demon again, the demon torturing a human being, the demon in Catholic faith, the demons and angels, they're actually supposed to bow down to humanity. That humanity is the peak of God's creation. So the demon is actually trying to enact violence against something that they see as, that they do not want to believe is superior to them. In that sense, and in the very old school, medieval Catholic perception, they're striking back at God for their, if you believe demons are evil and not simply placed there as tests by God for humanity to choose the right thing, then they want to cause harm because they want to watch something suffer. They want to watch this thing suffer out of anger, out of sheer cruelty. That is evil. And it is a choice. But it's also hardwired into their being at this point because they've collapsed, almost like a star, almost like a black hole that's collapsing on itself. They've collapsed so far into their vile evilness that there is no other option, but they've also chosen to go this far, if that makes sense. So that's the only points I push back on. But otherwise, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, from their perspective.
All right, Anthony, I'm putting my evil gloves on because you told me not to yap very much, and that was Yap City right there. Okay, so we're gonna start getting mean. We're gonna start getting mean. Okay,
go for it.
We're pulling it out. So I'm gonna put aside all the dumb shit that you just said about Hitler, and we're gonna focus specifically on the Cenobites out here. Okay, do you agree or disagree that Cenobites who are given the option to turn themselves like humans that encounter or solve the lament configuration, do you not agree that they are dehumanizing themselves, stripping themselves of their own humanity? Because you kept saying dehumanization is a big part of determining evil. Do you not think that depersonalizing, derealizing, and dehumanizing people that want to become Cenobites and are given the powers of Leviathan, would you not consider that a form of dehumanization?
Depends on the continuity of Hellraiser. That's the first question, because Hellraiser has multiple continuities with different laws and different ways of leading to how they become Cenobites. In the original Hellraiser films, so I'm going with the first few, because after the first few, the continuity gets all screwy. The Cenobites don't always choose to become Cenobites. They are twisted.
No, only the ones that are worthy of serving Leviathan are the ones that are given the option to become Cenobites. If you want to go with the lore for the later movies, it's a choice, right? That they're given a gift if they can essentially murder 5 other people to solve the configuration. But would you not consider that process itself, regardless of what canon it comes from, that process itself of stripping your humanity to become a Cenobite, choosing or otherwise, would you not consider that process to be akin or consider to be dehumanization of some kind?
I would consider it depending on the character and on the situation. Going with the original earlier films, the process by which they do become a Cenobite is unclear, because you have Julia, for example, who chooses to serve Leviathan, but herself is not a Cenobite. She never becomes a Cenobite, but she still serves Leviathan. Meanwhile, someone like Dr. Chenard doesn't choose at all. He's kind of he knows he wants the experience, but he hesitates and he's pushed into it. When he comes out the other end, he's in a very different position, and he's even causing harm to other Cenobites, choosing to go further than even they do. On the other hand, someone like Pinhead in the original continuity is very much pulled into the world of being being a Cenobite. It's unclear how willing he was. He was willing to open the box and experience pleasure, but it's unclear how much of his choice to become a Cenobite in that initial series of movies was his option. In fact, even then, when his good and evil portions are divided, because apparently you could just extract the evil from someone, he has a very different perspective on what he kind of implies that his humanity anchored him to a more just and orderly code, whereas the evil was more the chaos, the will to do harm without any anchoring to the laws or rules. So the question then becomes, what is the evil? The resist, it's kind of it gets a little more complicated with that kind of lore. But if you talk about the reboot, which is what it sounds like you're talking about, the more recent film that's on Hulu, yeah, then you have to choose to become a Cenobite, but even then you're given the option without knowing the full terms. And it's unclear how human you're on, how much humanity you have on the other side. So, because of that, all we know is that they experience untold experience, and that drives them into a new perspective, where their morality is completely inverted, where they think that the highest good is suffering. So, I would say it's a form of dehumanization in that sense, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's complete being divorced from humanity, because you still see humanity as something that can be sculpted into something like yourself. It's not quite the same thing as with a demon, where you see it as a lesser, but the demon sees humanity as a lesser being. It's more like untapped clay that has to be sculpted in that sense.
These weasel answers are pissing me off, Anthony.
Do you? Different perspectives.
That is a weasel answer. Do you agree or disagree that mutilating your body by stripping off your nipples, sticking sharp objects into different orifices in your fucking body, because Satan and Leviathan demanded of you, would you consider that dehumanizing? If I showed up to this debate with the skin peeled off of my face, my eyeballs rolled back in my head, and a fucking spear through my throat, would you say, Malcolm, you chose to do that to yourself? And I said, yes, to serve Leviathan. Would you say, Malcolm, that is a dehumanizing act, to strip yourself of your humanity, to become a fucking demon? What would you say?
I don't know if I'd say that. Clive Barker based the Cenobites off of real people, off of the real body modifications seen in the 80s. And people did do stuff like that, but they were still human. It's not just about the self-torture; it's also about the psychological change that they undergo as well. To the point
how many tattoos do you have?
I have no tattoos.
Okay, so shut the fuck up about body modification, Anthony. I don't want to hear a single fucking word from you about that. Do you agree or disagree that if I got my nipples cut off and wore them on my face like eyes after cutting my cheeks out so you could see my teeth, would you say, Malcolm, that's dehumanizing? Because
I,
I say that being a human isn't good enough for me. I have to be something otherworldly. Would you be like, wow, Malcolm, that's pretty dehumanizing of you to say?
I don't know if I'd say it was dehumanizing. I'd say it's kind of weird. It would be a very strange makeover. I'll put it that way. But that's not. That's an oversimplification. Of what happens to the Cenobites? That's the problem.
I'm gonna crash the fuck out. I'm gonna crash the fuck out. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm crashing out. I'm crashing and burning. I'm crashing and burning. Have you ever done suspension, Anthony? Have you ever
Suspension?
done that?
That might be a little too much information for this kind of conversation.
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't want to hear shit from you about body modification, okay? So the question becomes, is there a part of you, and we know that this is true, at least in the Hellraiser universe, that there is a part of you that is killed in order to, essentially become a Cenobite. What's his fucking name in the third one? Pinhead's original character, the one that was in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
There's a significant amount of stripping you of your, not only identity, but your humanity as well to be able to commit these acts. Because like you said initially, which I agree with, is that part of it is a trick, right? Is that you don't really know what you're getting. So let's say that you do say, yes, I would love to be a Cenobite. I don't really know what that means, but that sounds kind of fucking cool. And they're like, okay, ready? I'm going to peel your nipples off. And you're like, wait, hang on, bro. What the fuck are you talking about? It's too late because you've already chosen. So there is that aspect of, do we really know what we're consenting to if we decide that we want to become a Cenobite? But nonetheless, that there is a significant dehumanization process because the old self dies in order to become part of a Cenobite. And then when they integrate or when they reintegrate, like we see in the third movie, that their humanity itself is one of the things that keeps the Cenobites tethered to any kind of metric of morality that aligns with Leviathan. Because after the World War II dude, after they split, Pinhead is like, actually, fuck this shit. I don't give a shit if somebody opened the box or not. I want to kill bitches. I want to fuck humanity up. I want to murder people. I want people to suffer. I don't care if they asked for our presence or not. Would you not say that that indicates malice or evil?
Well, then comes the question. Is the part that was Pinhead, that was divided from Pinhead, the pure chaotic side, is that really what a Cenobite is? I'd say it's the unification of the two sides, not necessarily one aspect or the other. Once that aspect is removed, they stop being what is we understand as a Cenobite. It's more just wearing the skin of one in that sense. So the question then becomes, is it really that humanity has died, or is that so twisted beyond measure that it no longer resembles humanity? If that's dehumanization, then yes. But I think it's something a little different. I don't think it's the same as dehumanization, because dehumanization implies that you are completely detached and devoid from what you once were. This is more anchored, but it's skewed. It's not the dehumanization of a person, it's the contortion of a person, the complete inversion of his or her center and what have you. So, does that answer your question?
No, it does not. Because I think that one of the big things that we're not connecting on is that we have a different metric of like where we would say that there is like an underlying nature of a Cenobite and how much of that is influenced by like the core of the person that chooses to become the Cenobite. And that's taking the people off the table that have always been Cenobites, right? But I would say that in Hellraiser 3, it is like very directly shown that Cenobites, like in nature, like the natural state of one is to just like create chaos. And that's what Leviathan itself is. Leviathan itself seeks to destroy flesh and chaos, especially in humanity. That's like its only fucking purpose. And so if these are the beings that are carrying out the will of Leviathan, like you mentioned earlier, where it's like a question of, does this thing want to cause harm? And if so, is it, an intentional harm? Is it a negligent harm? Is it like wiping the eyelash? Even if it is any of those things, I would still consider it to be evil because it is wreaking destruction on a population of people, humanity. And then two, I think it very strongly shows that in service to this being, that you have to act in ordinance with what it wants and what its ultimate goal is. And it's to basically torture humanity through like perverted incentives of what pleasure is, right?
Of course. Here's where I draw the issue with the lore of Hellraiser, though, for a bit. Again, using the older films as a model, because when you get to the reboot, it gets all screwy. But using old school Hellraiser lore, I don't think that the evil side of Pinhead is truly a Cenobite. It's the combination of the two aspects, the humanity with that chaos, because the Cenobites are ultimately beings of lawful evil, not chaotic evil, whereas Pinhead is, in the third film, pure chaotic evil. That's not really Pinhead. It has to be the two connected. Because, again, the Cenobites do follow a sense of order. Hell is a very orderly place under Leviathan. Yes, it is destructive. Yes, it is torture. But it is still a place where order and organization exist. It is a labyrinth, after all. It's not simply a screwball spiral. It is a structured architecture to it. And because of that, using the third movie's Pinhead as the core example of what a Cenobite is, it's actually proves my point that that isn't what a Cenobite is, because none of the other Cenobites are like that. They are orderly, they are controlled, and they see humanity less as... The reason why I say that it's inversion of morality, not removal of humanity, is that they see this torture not necessarily the way that a normal person would. To them, it's the highest good of joy. To them, it's like Michelangelo making a beautiful work of art. So from their intentionality, it's the highest good. What's so frightening about the Cenobites is that their highest good is abjectly terrifying to us. That's where the horror of the movie comes. Well, the horror of the movie comes from the people who actually play with that idea. It's the fear comes from the people who tempt fate and go into that world and flirt with it or come back from it or what have you. The Cenobites are just arbiters of that experience. They're so far gone into their world that they cannot differentiate right from wrong. They cannot differentiate what is good and bad to a person. And in fact, when they do this harm that we perceive as harm to these people, they see it as the biggest gift in the world. They see it as a great boon. They see it as the highest joy. So my problem then becomes from a perspective of them. You can't really call that evil. You can call it horrifying. And I think it's more horrifying because they don't see themselves as evil, because they don't see it as harm. That's what's so frightening about the Cenobites. You can't rationalize...
Unfortunately, we're going to have to do meta-ethics then. Do you think that there's objective morality?
No, I don't. I think that there is...
How can you be a Catholic and not believe in objective morality, Anthony? What is this?
Because Italian Catholic, we believe in guilt.
Obviously, I am also like a Roman Catholic, but there is objective morality now. There is objective morality now. How does guilt negate objective morality?
You know what makes an Italian Catholic the most guilty? Not cooking enough on his first Sunday meal. That too, actually, yeah. breaking lasagna and breaking spaghetti before you put it.
We're gonna have to do meta ethics, and this is I have activated my trap card.
Sure.
If we do not divine morality from God, where does morality come from? What are ethics? How do we divine this?
Glad you asked. Culturally, ethics comes from society. We form it as a collective. This is
who's right and who's wrong.
There's the question. It depends. There are elements of society. Again, this is all relative. And this is why it's so tough to discuss morality from an objective standpoint, because there is no objective morality, in my opinion. They are things that we collectively agree upon within our society to be evil. The problem comes in when you talk about things outside of that society and their perspectives. Because
do you think that beheading orphans is wrong?
Personally, yeah. Oh, yeah, completely.
Okay. If you lived in a society where every day you had to behead one orphan to please your sun god, would you still say that's wrong, or would you say, hell yeah, dude, hand the orphan to me?
Well, in a society like that, what you're saying is that would be the religious doctrine that we follow, and we would probably have a reason to believe that would be the way to maybe avoid the end of the world. The question to me, you look at the Aztec beliefs. They believe that to make the sun rise the next day, you'd have to have a human sacrifice.
So you have no morality. You just follow what is doctrine of the law, or what is colloquially or culturally appropriate for wherever you live. So if you move to the Middle East, you would be the first one to push a gay person off the building.
Ugh. Okay, well, there's the question right there. Let's discuss. Okay, let's back up a second there for a second. First off, that's not a universal belief in the Middle East. So
just walk with me. Just walk with me for a second. Don't get hung up on semantics.
No, I feel like this is already going into my trap card, which is to say, within society, there are trends of what we think of as right or wrong. There are certain things that we objectively believe are right and are wrong in a society. But to say that going to a different society where some people in that society believe a certain way, you would believe that all people have to act a certain way in that society, that to me is very reductive in that sense. That's the problem there.
In a sense, okay. I don't disagree with that, because there's going to be variance, but again, that comes down to the question of who's right and who's wrong.
Well,
because someone is wrong, right? Someone is wrong. Regardless of what society teaches you, it is still wrong to behead an infant. Because right?
I
That
would
is
say,
wrong.
I would using from my personal perspective, yes. I'm not going to defend, you know, that level of late stage abortion. Uh, I'm kidding. That's a terrible joke. I'm sorry.
It was a beautiful joke.
It was kind of funny. It was a little funny.
Don't listen to everybody crying. It was hilarious. I loved it. I endorse this message.
But no, but like objectively, there are certain things that we collectively agree of as wrong. The problem is that there are two ways of discussing this in relation to the question of evil races. Do we talk about another society that enacts cruelty as a rule? And do we talk about creatures that are so far beyond our morality that it just doesn't occur to them, or their perspectives of right and wrong are so inverted that that's seen as the highest good?
And congratulations, you walked into my second trap card because those beings are entering our world. Therefore, they are judged on our metric of morality now.
Well, by who? Who are they judged by? The
Us,
question,
because they come to our realm, right? If I went to the Middle East, and let's just say, again, I'm being hyperbolic for, just the sake of brevity. If I go to the Middle East and I see people like beating women to death in the street or whatever for adultery or showing their calves or whatever the fuck, and I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck? They're going to be like, what's wrong with you? This is a Tuesday, dude. Like, what are you freaking out about? This is what we do. Because I entered their society. My morality is different than theirs. If I'm entering, and by your own logic, that society dictates morality, if another entity enters our realm, we have to judge them based on our morality, not theirs, because they are choosing to enter our realm and engage with us as human beings because they don't have to.
I'm not gonna lie, this is getting kind of close to Arthur Conrad Heart of Darkness kind of discussions here. Like, the problem is that we might not understand their ways. That's the thing too. We can't necessarily. Now, again, when it comes down to certain things here, we're talking about like really intense stuff here. We're talking about whether or not you have to follow the rules of a god. Let's say you mentioned like your first example was the child sacrifice to satisfy the god. Well, then the question becomes, what happens if they don't do it? Do they believe that the world will end? And is that worth sacrificing everyone for? You gotta look at it from that perspective. If you're looking, though, at just wanting cruelty, though, that's different. Wanting cruelty is not acceptable in any human society. So the extreme example here, I think, is hitting a point of problematic elements here. We're kind of ignoring the actual discussion here to look for the most extreme examples in terms of our human society.
Because I'm making a point and I'm building upon it that because to an extent, I'm Catholic. I believe in objective morality. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't believe morality is subjective. I believe it's objective. Mm-hmm. But if I walk into your world for a second and I can see that morality is heavily dictated by the society that you live in and things that you and your society deem, 1, necessary, 2, acceptable, and 3, what is wrong and what is right. If you take someone or something from another society and you put them in a human society, they are being judged by our metric of morality. So when you say you want to look at the morality of evil from the perspective of the races, I think that is completely useless to the conversation because, of course, they don't see what they're doing is wrong. Of course, people that do evil things don't think that they're doing evil. Of course, people that are sacrificing the child, to the sun god or whatever, don't think that they're harming the child. They think they're saving everybody else because you can endlessly justify any action under your own moral framework. But when you enter in a different society that has a different moral value, you have to look at it from the perspective of the society that's being affected by the outsiders that are coming in and imposing their morality on humanity. Does that make sense?
It does, but I feel like we're straying very close to moral imperialism with this discussion. The problem
we're talking hypothetically about Cenobites. You know what I'm saying?
No. But I mean, we've been talking about, even with the Middle East part, I think the problem is this also when we discuss this topic. And here's where we get into the real murky, real-world implications that are tough. When we talk about a society, we may not understand the full extent of what's happening there. We have to understand why they want to believe the things they do or why they choose to believe the things that they do. The problem there becomes, if we the example of, and most societies do have forms of cruelty, forms of cultural taboos, and they can overlap and intersect with our own in many cases. Even a society that we deem in fiction as being evil, they still have things they see as a dishonorable thing, like the Drow from Forgotten Realms, for example. And for the Drow society, it's totally acceptable to undermine and betray and declare war on your enemies and kill them in the night. But the moment you're caught, everyone puts up a big show of how aghast they are of it. That you can't be seen doing it, but if you did it quietly, they would celebrate your success. It's that kind of taboo. all societies have a taboo that they think of as not good. Others have a real sense of, hey, this is right, this is wrong. And many have a cosmology that they assign to their worldview that affects how they see things. The problem here is that I think it's very important, especially from the perspective of creative writing, from fiction, to see where the characters are perceiving their own actions from. What are their wants? What are their needs? What do they see as the highest good? What do they see as the lowest low? The problem is when we look at it as judging this and judging that, we put ourselves as the highest arbiter of morality. And that's not something I think is useful in discussing fiction. Because
the only reason, again, that I disagree, and I can even use a lesser loaded example, is if you love weed, Anthony, and I'm sure that you do, like the good Catholic that you are. If you love weed and you get on a plane right now and you fly to Texas, you can't have that. Why? Because you are entering Texas and you are agreeing to their laws, right? And laws come downstream from morality, right? So I will solely operate on the principle that like these entities are entering our realm and therefore operate on our rules of morality. In the same way that if we take, for example, demons that enter the human realm, they still have to operate on humanistic principles. So regardless, depending on what movie you watch, all demons, or whatever you believe, if it's a spiritual belief for you, it is for me. But like if you're watching like The Conjuring or like American Horror Story or something like that, the demons and the ghosts and the spirits have rules that they have to follow, and those rules are relative to what they inhabit, right? And I would say the exact same thing for an entity that enters the human realm, and it has to follow the rules of the land that it enters, right? It is choosing to engage with humanity, so it makes no sense to say, oh, well, from their perspective, they think they're doing good. Of course they do. Of course.
Okay, I
want
to back up a second with the weed thing. The reason why weed's illegal was because of racism in the 20s. It based itself on
Anthony, I'm going to fucking kill myself. I'm going to fucking kill myself in a video game. I didn't realize that I accidentally scheduled a debate with In Praise of Shadows. What is fucking happening right now, Anthony? Are you really trying to outwoke me? You're white and you're cis. You don't even start. Don't even start. Okay.
No, it was made back. It was made back in like the 20s because it was a Mexican sounding drug that would corrupt the youth. That's why they did it. It was the drug of choice of black people and Mexican people, according to
Okay, then I'll say crack. I'll say coke. White people love coke. Italians love coke. I'll say coke. How's that? You want to go and do coke, but you can't take it. You can't take it anywhere but Italy. That's the only place they'll let you have it. You go, and they're like, no, Anthony, no coke allowed. And you're like, oh, fuck. You have to follow those laws, right? If you go somewhere else, right?
Well, the problem then is that with assigning law as morality. Law is not morality. Law is a system of rules. You look at the alignment.
Myself.
Okay, let me bring up the alignment chart here.
Oh my god.
Your basic D&D alignment chart. Let me bring this up. The idea of lawful versus chaotic versus good versus evil. Lawful and chaotic, you can be very good but hate the law and defy it openly because the law is not always just. If the law was always just, there wouldn't be the civil rights movement. They wouldn't be, Stonewall. They wouldn't be all these events that pushed against the laws at the time that were unjust and causing pain. Because by our perspectives, treating a person like they're not a person is inherently against our code of ethics. And so a law that exists that causes that kind of level of dehumanization, of mistreatment, that's bad, subjectively through our moral perspective. The problem is that we're acting like law and morality are the same thing. They're very different things, and they don't follow the same adherence to each other. That's the issue.
There's too much autism in this debate for me, Anthony. I have to be so real with you. Like, because I know you're being sneaky. I know you know what I'm saying, but you're in praise of shadowing me right now. I know you know what I'm saying, but you're doing it. You're like,
I haven't mentioned Wendigoon once in this stream, okay?
You're getting close. I can feel it. That's your next trap card. Next trap card.
My next trap card is when I talk about Wendigoon's Dante's Inferno video at one point. I do want to actually, all joking aside, I feel like it's interesting when, this is not part of the debate, it's just an interesting concept. I think it's interesting when popular YouTubers talk about literature to be more, to summarize it and miss some key details, but that's a whole other discussion. That's the autist Dante Inferno rant coming eventually. Not against Wendigoon, just against like the discussion of old literature in terms of
everything against Wendigoon. That guy's not Wendigoon. Sorry, In Praise of Shadow. My bad. I got to mix up.
I don't have a strong feeling on Wendigoon personally. I know some people love Wendigoon. I think there are elements of his critique that I feel like it could be a little more polished, could be a little stronger. But again, that's more the nitpick than like any ethical declaration of anything. Anyway,
Yeah, Wendigoon is a Protestant. I agree. Fuck that guy.
I
I agree.
think we've gone on enough. I think we should have a little break and respond to some super chats at this point, because I feel like we're getting into some good stuff here. But I do think we need to like apply it to something sooner than later. Otherwise, we're gonna go off in abstracts.
Okay, I'm gonna run to the restroom really quickly. If you wanna
No
dance
problem.
for me, little monkey, and then I'm gonna get another drink and I'll be right back.
Sounds good. I'm gonna talk some super chats in the meanwhile.
All right, I'm gonna have an AirPod in, so if you say anything Catholic Mizia, I will come back and we'll have problems. Okay?
Valid, valid. Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
All right,
looks
I'll be
there's some
back.
Catholic questions already, so it was be interesting. Okay, so user 225, thank you for the super chat. How does godhood slash cosmic being factor into evil? I think we discussed that already. I personally feel that godhood puts you in a different plane of existence. So being a cosmic entity, your perspective of ethics is so far different. You're not seeing things the same way a normal person would. So that's my perspective there. Crimson Ender, thank you for super chat. This was just an objective versus subjective morality debate in disguise, goddammit. I'm sorry, Crim. Sorry, Crim. I'm very much subjective morality. I think that ethics and all that, it's all a matter of perspective. I do think there's certain things that are like universally accepted to be wrong, but I do think that in terms of the more specific nuances and cultural norms, that's where it gets a little different. What's impolite in one culture is welcomed in the other. It's polite in some cultures to burp after a meal or not finish all your food. In others, it's seen as a high disrespect. So I think that kind of applies to every level of the discussion. But there's some things like murder or theft that's just not liked anywhere you go. It's bad. It's frowned upon in all societies, typically. Baichi Epiodera, thank you for super chat. Also, don't conflate dark with evil. Dark can be just as good as light. Sorry, that one's one of the things that is like a cyclical argument. I do agree. And that becomes the question, too, whether or not dark is malicious or dark is just aesthetics, you know? Aesthetic evil is very different from, conceptual evil. Baichi again. The human-centric argument is a big issue, too. Yeah, exactly. The closer you are to humanity, the different your perspective of morality is. Nick Wolf, what's this civility BS? We were promised a bloodbath. Well, I hope you got it. I think we definitely went off the deep end for a little bit there. Angels Art and Gaming, thank you for super chat. My friend has an OC we use for RPs. He's an ancient chaos entity who has lived several lifetimes and timelines. He's evil in a morality sense, but in his mind, he's bored. So chaos keeps him alive. I like that concept. I love the concept of an entity that's so old and so removed from existence that they lose track of who they are. They kind of, it becomes malice from a perspective of like, well, these are all puppets. They're ephemeral. They come and they go. They vanish and they disappear. And that's very different, I think, than necessarily going into that kind of sense of these people are causing harm. It's more that they don't even see these people as people. They dehumanize them based on experience, which is interesting. There's a lot that you can do with that concept from a writing standpoint. Baichi again. We don't kink shame here, Malcolm. You do you. That's fair. Angels Art and Gaming again. I'll have an answer. Consensually, wanting your nips cut off equals not dehumanizing. Not consensually wanting your nips cut off dehumanizing. Yeah, I think that's fair, because that's someone else taking your sense of what you identify as humanity away from you. That being said, though, where do we count on Brazilian waxing as accidentally, that's a whole different discussion there. Baichi, I'm a French Catholic, and I don't believe in objective morality, and I even have training to almost be a nun, but usually the rulers say it's good. Hey, that's fair. That's very fair, I think.
I'm back.
Oh, awesome. Just reading some super chats here. Also, that type of morality, killing children, is based on survival of the species and not the morality of a god or ruler. I think specifically referring to one of the previous questions about godhood and sacrificing of babies. And that's the question, too. Is it morally justified to sacrifice the safety of your society and of your world? It's there's a story, I believe it's by Octavia Butler. Not Octavia. No, it's not Octavia Butler. It's, oh my God, Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm so sorry. Where I mentioned this in my Cyberpunk video. The whole of a society is morally, it's a utopia. Everyone's happy, everyone's well fed, everyone's warm. You have clothing doesn't have holes in it. The only thing is though, the society is built on the conceptual suffering of one child kept in a basement in one of the homes. Everyone on top is living life perfectly, but they have to ignore the fact that their happiness and their goodness is derived from the suffering of one individual person. And the story focuses on those who choose to walk away from society as a result. Okay, so Angels Art and Gaming. Texas laws have a bit of a mixed bag with weed. Medicinal weed is okay, but recreational's no. Doesn't stop the neighbors though. Hey, that's fair. And again, that begs the question: are the laws justified, or are the laws wrong? And are you doing it for personal satisfaction that doesn't harm anyone really, or are you doing it irresponsibly? And again, it's the range of things. Morality and goodness, it's a whole range of things. All right, a couple more questions real quick. A better example for the weed thing is Korea. The actor for Thanos in Squid Game 2 was blacklisted for a decade for recreational weed use, which I think is just ethically wrong. And again, it depends on, I'm sure there's a movement in Korea that pushes against that as well. Oh. Crimson Enders is very mad. So the Wave Runners, are you a Cenobite, Anthony? No, then stop talking. Fair enough. I have not embarked on Leviathan's journey. Mystic Blue, would the spiral from Uzumaki be evil? I would say no, because I don't even think it even has intention. Like, it's kind of like the glimmer, the shimmer from Annihilation. It's unclear if it has any will. It just kind of does things, and it's almost like it's like saying a hurricane is evil. It's not evil; it just exists. Crimson Ender. That's not the point of Amalays, you uncultured swine. Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm not phrasing it correctly. I was just going quickly with it, but that's fair. Shay Sims just wanted to note that the church was responsible for killing thousands of children in modern history through the Indian reform schools. 100% agree. That is something that's deeply disturbing. And the church was heavily responsible for that. It was entirely accountable for that horror. And the ones who walk away from Omala, yep. And the idea is that whether or not you can choose to walk away from all that, from that suffering, if you choose not to exist in a society that relies on that kind of pain and horror. Anyway, yeah, no, the church is responsible for a massive amount of horror and torture over the course of thousands of years. So, yeah, that's the other thing too. Krim, would you like to explain what the point of the story is then? I feel like you're like throwing things at me from Nova Scotia. All right. If you want to read your super chats too, Malcolm, I'm done with mine.
Okay.
I'll let Krim explain. I'll explain Krim's intention. Krim is throwing things at us from Nova Scotia, by the way. At least me. I'm not sure about you, Malcolm, but definitely me. I'm getting some things thrown at me. I heard something at my windows. I heard some things bumping off my windows.
I just work here. I don't know anything
fair.
about that. Sai says $5. Technically, ascending to enlightenment or godhood would dehumanize someone. Is that inherently evil? In my opinion, I would say that like, yeah, because humans aren't supposed to be like godly. But generally speaking, like dehumanization, at least colloquially, has a negative attribution to it, right? Like you are stripping yourself of humanity for like what would be considered like carnal purposes, which would be I would consider to be like evil, right? Where or even if you use it in the context of other people, like have you ever looked and said I dehumanize that person and it's used in a neutral or positive way? No, it's usually in a way of like stripping somebody of their humanity in a negative way. I mean, we could like torture definition that to death about like what is the actual etymology of what it means to dehumanize somebody, and if there are like other positive examples of that. But generally speaking, I would say almost ubiquitously it's used in a disparaging or a negative way. I don't think that we were like, wow, I can't believe that we dehumanized the Native Americans before we massacred them. That was such a positive thing, right? Like I would consider that to be a positive thing. And then Layla, $5. You reap what you sow, Malcolm. You scheduled a debate with an wave emoji autist who is deranged about media. And listen, we are all we're all lovable but intellectually disabled here. So, that's what we're all here for, I suppose. And then said, oh dear, thanks for the $2 for my therapy fund. I'm certainly going to need it. I've been outwoked, which is just a fucking embarrassment to me and my kind. So,
Okay, so I do want to read Krim's explanation of the story so we can give a perspective, and I do think Krim's read is correct here. So credit to Krim here. The point is of the ones who walk away from Omelas is that we wouldn't believe in a perfect society unless there was some horrific cost. That the story wouldn't be believable to us as humans unless there is that kind of pain. And the ones who walked away from Omelas is about the way we think about fiction and goodness and evil in fiction. That we can't see a world that's perfect without suffering inherent to it. So I will give Krim that. That is a very good point. I think both reads are valid, but I feel like they're different reads of the same text. I think still get us to the same discussion, just from different angles of it. I think with fiction, especially, there's multiple ways you can read and interpret a story. I don't think there is one point necessarily, but I think they're both equally compelling points that you can both read from the work. And I think that's one thing I want to bring up too that's important. I don't always think there is Krim is angry. I will accept his anger on this one. Angel and Gaming, Krim make a Domino Nobles video about Ant. That's fair. Go for it. You're more than welcome to. Is it the one that Gwyn is dissecting with the story? Yeah. Again, Krim is now throwing bricks at my house. His pitch is extremely good. I don't know how he threw a brick that hard and that fast that hit my roof right now, but I did just hear something shatter upstairs. Though it might be someone breaking into the house. I'm not sure which yet, but it's one of the two.
And what a bad time to not be an American. It'd be a wonderful time to fetch your trusty revolver.
Oh my goodness. A dim channel. What about? Oh, here's a good question. What about the flagellants? Are they not mutilating and dehumanizing themselves in the name of God? Are they evil for doing this to themselves? Okay, so this is actually a good point. For those who don't know, the flagellants were an order during the bubonic plague. They believed that the plague was a curse from God and that God was angry at them. And so what they would do is they would go from village to village, basically punishing themselves by whipping themselves and just performing these really grotesque rituals in public. Ironically, despite the fact they were trying to fight the plague, they would leave so much blood around that they would draw the rats and the fleas and then thus spread the plague all over the place. So rather than trying to stop the plague, they did inadvertently cause more plague in their wake. But they believed they were doing good to God, but they were also enacting on selfish actions as well, ones that did cause harm. They were known to enact violence on passerbys and villages outside of their rituals, which itself is against the Catholic doctrine. So then becomes the question, what part are we discussing? The self-mutilation or the cruelty that they enacted on others just by circumstance? I think like with most things, it's hard to paint it with one brush. They believe that the ritual was good, but that doesn't justify the cruelty they did along the way, nor does it really make up for the harm they caused with their bloody ritual. So, it's a whole thing. Again, a lot of this comes from the perspective of looking at how we discuss media and fiction. Sorry, Malcolm, I feel like I'm talking too much. Sorry about that.
Oh no, you're all good. I'm looking at my vines.
Valid.
I'm crushing that's not true. I'm getting crushed by solitaire. I'm just big chilling.
Fair enough. So, let's look at the next point of discussion. I think I've rambled enough about subjective morality and all that in perspective. What's the next point of discussion?
I think most interesting to me is the question of whether or not evil races themselves. Like, I don't think that we will agree on the evil race question, at least in regard to horror. But is that lazy writing?
I think, and that's one thing I think is of two. Let me hear your perspective first, because I have obviously with the whole video saying what I thought.
I think that evil races and the concept of like evil malignant beings or spirits or entities or whatever, I think is what actually makes true really exceptional horror. And that's for several reasons. And the first is that, one, they're typically immortal. So you can't just like kill them to stop them. There has to be some kind of like ritual. You have to know how to do it. You have to, dismember them, whatever it may be. They can't be like physically stopped without like a significant intervention from either like a spiritual thing or, insane like desecration of whatever it is. And and it also cannot be like rationalized or reasoned with in any meaningful way. And that I think is like the pinnacle of horror, is that there is just like there's something that is coming for you. You might understand it, but you certainly can't stop it. And that whatever happens to you is inevitable, and that you surrender yourself to the will of that individual. Because if I think about humanistic horror, and I think about movies like The Strangers, maybe as an American or somebody that owns guns, that isn't particularly terrifying to me, because I can kill that person. I can reason with that person. I can logic my way out of a situation. I can outsmart the person that I, am facing that is trying to hurt me. But if there is some kind of being that is only compelled by a desire to hurt me, it's immortal for all intents and purposes, and it has no rationality that I can appeal to in order to get it to stop. I think that is the pinnacle of horror, is like the inescapable terror of something coming for you that you cannot stop in any way, right?
I don't disagree with that aspect of it. For some horror, the idea of something that's inescapable and that you can't stop and it's just pursuing and it's going to destroy you and snuff out the light of your life. Yeah, that is a horrifying concept. But the question is whether or not that thing is evil. Or, in a lot of cases, which I think is interesting, is it just a bigger predator than we are? I think one thing of horror that's so good is when it knocks us off the food chain a little bit. We think of ourselves as the dominant species of the planet. Well, what if there's something bigger? A Lovecraftian monster, a bigger predator, a monster that just doesn't care what we do to stop it. You look at like Godzilla, for example. Godzilla would not say is evil. Godzilla is, most of the time in the Godzilla movies, he was either like some creature that already existed that we screwed up, or some sleeping ancient thing we woke up with our bombs, and he's pissed off. Like, he's not. It's like that scene in Men in Black where he goes through the shooting gallery and he sees like he's not snarling, he's sneezing, he's got tissue right there. It's that kind of perspective where Godzilla's not evil. He's just pissed off, or
well, I think that evil, like in horror, is like very particularly crafted, and it's usually almost never monster horror. I would say that it's going to be demonic, supernatural. The best example that I can think of are like Deadites or even Michael Myers. Just things that are like acting without rhyme, reason, rationality, or anything like that. Obviously, if I put myself in the shoes of Michael Myers, like obviously I would want to kill that bitch Jamie Lee Curtis too after so many years. But void of all of that, right? Like the biggest thing is that its sole purpose is to like either hurt, terrorize, or kill you. And there's no way to rationalize with whatever it is in order to get it to stop. And there's no physical force that will make it stop, right? Like, it's not like you can just pull out a fucking gun and shoot the demon, right? That's not going to do anything. They don't care. Or, I can't pray to get rid of, what was that movie that came out about the little kid and he picked up like the rocks of the Grand Canyon and then the native spirits came after him? Praying to Jesus didn't do fuck all for him because it was like a demon from an entirely different, culture. And he had no way to fucking stop it. Like, those are the things that I think like personify what is like good horror, is because, again, and maybe this is the American in me, I'm not fucking scared of somebody breaking into my house. I'm not scared of that at all. Because God bless you, I've been dying to use my 6-hour. I've been dying to use it, okay? Like, I'm not scared of that kind of shit. The things that are terrifying are things that you can't control, and there's no way to get out of it, right? And I think that kind of horror is reserved specifically for, like, what would be considered colloquially as, like, evil races. Even if you and I don't agree that they are intrinsically evil, but, like, that their sole purpose is either spiritual or, like, some kind of phenomenon where it's, like, all they want to do is fuck you up, and that's it.
Okay, so there's actually a few interesting things you talked about. I want to break it down from my perspective too. You said a lot of interesting things. I want to try to dissect it a little bit to get to some neat nuggets there. If we're talking about individuals like a Michael Myers, like a Freddy Krueger, or like the Clown, their cruelty, their evil, yeah, that could be very interesting. Because and in the video I differentiate this too. An individual who is evil is not the same as a race that's evil. A person can choose to be evil. What makes Michael Myers so interesting and so frightening is that he is so singular. He is a singular shape of malice and cruelty. There is nothing like Michael Myers in the world. He is the only one of his kind. And because of that, he's frightening. He's terrifying. Freddy Krueger chooses to be this monster, chooses to be this cruel predator upon children. That's frightening. That's evil. That's scary stuff. And that's good. That's very good. I think, again, to your point, it is the idea of some unstoppable thing coming at you. Evil Dead also. The thing with the Deadites, though, is interesting because here is an important question. What is interesting about the Deadites? is it the Deadites themselves or the harm it inflicts on the characters that we care about? A
I would
lot of
say
what you
both, honestly.
what I think to an extent it's both with the Deadites, but like that question, I think what makes the Deadites so fun is that they're also engaging and entertaining. They, depending on which movie it is, you laugh at them 1 second, then are horrified by them the next. That dynamic element is really interesting. Um, in The Exorcist, I think the demon is less inherently interesting than the impact the demon has on the family, on Karis, on on the McNeil family, on Reagan and Chris McNeil. I think that impact the demon has is more compelling, and that's one of the reasons why the family is focused more in that film than the demon Pazuzu necessarily is. We get very small snippets as to what its motivations are, what it is like, really outside of it, but most of it exists just to torment people, and that torment is the focus. That's the horror of the story. But I think that it's like all things; it's on execution. A demon is interesting, I think, more in how it relates to humanity, how it makes us feel small and vulnerable and terrified existentially. But is the demon inherently the most interesting part of a story about demons? Even with your examples, you cited how the demon impacts the character. I think that in a lot of cases, the supernatural entity, like what's the one? Insidious, with that like a lipstick demon that looks like Darth Maul. There's nothing inherently interesting beyond the appearance of the demon, about the demon. He's just a thing that's going to harm this kid. What makes him frightening is how he impacts the family, how he impacts the kid, how we feel threatened by it. But that's not necessarily the demon is inherently interesting. It could be anything. It could be a big tentacle monster. It could be, there's nothing about the demon beyond its aesthetics and beyond the threat it poses that makes it dynamic or interesting.
The only reason that I disagree is because I think that part of the fear, at least in my perspective, when it comes to like any kind of like supernatural entity and specifically demons, is that there's twofold. One is that it is just kind of like this malignant force that is, for all intents and purposes, unstoppable, right? Just in general, like obviously maybe they do the exorcism or whatever the fuck and it saves everybody. And the second part is that it challenges your understanding of your place in the universe. So you're not wrong there. But I think that it discredits the idea that like if I look at Insidious, that movie rings completely different to me than like The Exorcist or any kind of movie that like sources from biblical material. Because the Insidious demon isn't really like a biblical demon. Like if we're talking about paranormal horror, there's like two different kinds, right? Like there's like supernatural horror and then there's like Christian horror or Catholic horror. Those kinds of horror I think are distinct because you can still have like these demons that don't fit neatly under the umbrella of what religious institutions or whatever faith you follow would colloquially or even definitionally consider a demon. I think that's different then when you look at something like The Conjuring, when you look at something like The Exorcism of Emily Rose, when you look at something like The Exorcist, like The Omen, like the concept itself is what's scary about it because these are things that like, especially people who are religious, that these are things that I don't know about you, you're raised and you know to never fuck with that shit. Absolutely ever. And that's the stuff that's scary is because it personifies that fear that it is real, one. Two, it's coming for you. And three, it challenges you in like your morality in an extension of your faith, right? And those are the things that are scary. So I wouldn't say, first of all, I fucking hate Insidious. So that I'm poisoned there. I think Insidious is so gay. But like, I would say that like the concept of like there being this realm where these demons do exist is the part that's scary. It's not necessarily him, right? Because the makeup and the costume design was like so gay. I was like, this is hilarious. Why are you guys showing this to me? Like, I would say that the concept itself is what's frightening, not necessarily like the demon itself, right?
Yeah. I think, now first off, I'm not the biggest Insidious fan. I just use it as an easy example because I think everyone has seen it. And I think it's a very interesting, I think actually my difference there is less, whether or not the supernatural is based on religious doctrine or not. I don't think that's the big factor for me. I think the factor is whether the harm the demon poses is physical or psychological or spiritual. I think those three are the big thing. Because you look at Insidious, the harm is physical. The demon wants to invade the boy's body. He wants to take away this child's body and like inhabit it. And the threat is you're going to lose your kid. Like it's more like life or death. It's the same thing as with Poltergeist. The threat isn't psychological in Poltergeist. It's physical. It's the family being attacked by this outer entity. Although I think in Poltergeist you can make the argument that the ghosts are totally in the right because, they're the disturbed dead. They move the the headstones, but not the bodies. You know, it's like they're disrupted. They just want to rest in peace, and they can't rest. Until you get the sequels where it gets all, kerfuckled. But The Exorcist, it's different. The Exorcist is purely spiritual and psychological. It hits the emotional core of these characters, and I think that's where we get a little different, because I think the rules of the demons are less important to me than what they're doing in the plot, like their actions. Because you can also take it outside of the Catholic faith, the Christian faith, and use demons in other sources. A great example is Noroi the Curse, which is this absolutely fantastic Japanese found footage film. And in that, the whole thing of the movie, to spoil a key plot, the point of the plot, everything that goes wrong in the film is because there was this ritual done every couple of decades to control this demon that would cause havoc and harm and everything. And one year, the last year they performed this ritual for the town was like, I think they had a dam built, and there was a man-made lake that came up and smothered the area in water. The last ritual to control the demon went wrong. And because of that, everything since then is unraveled. The demon causes physical harm. It causes psychological harm. It causes all kinds of harm. And it's not based on any Christian iconography. It's all based on Japanese folklore. Yet, the core tenets are still applicable to what we would do in like an Exorcist film. And I think that's very interesting, that kind of transplantation of ideas. Same with a movie called The Wailing. It's a Korean horror film where demonic possession is treated like a pandemic, where it's like a virus that spreads from body to body. And it's an idea of faith. Who do you trust? And there are multiple people from different backgrounds, with different folklore backgrounds, spiritual backgrounds, religious backgrounds, who offer solutions. And the question is, these all sound equally compelling. There's no evidence I have to really believe one's better than the other outside of what I feel in my gut. And that's the idea of it. So I think the idea of looking at it from the perspective of like, is this following the doctrine of a certain faith or not? Or is it more general? Or is the lipstick demon from Insidious a flamboyant homosexual?
Yeah.
I think it all depends on which he is. He's basically the closest we get to live action him from Powerpuff Girls.
Very good.
I think that question is less important than what does it pose to the narrative. Because the way I look at all of this is that I look at it from the perspective of what does this do to the plot of the story? How does it affect it? How does it affect the characters? How does it affect all that? That's my perspective anyway. I'm not sure if that was rambling, but I try my best to keep it a little tighter.
You're just you should change your name to Yapany.
There we go.
No, I just think that like in general, the evil races as a whole and horror is like phenomenally interesting for many different reasons, because it like specifically like the example that I just always love are Deadites, because Deadites I would say are like the clearest example of this. And it's also, there's like legions of them, right? It's not just one. And even if you destroy one Necronomicon, cool, there's two more, you're fucked. And everyone has, you know, a different kind of entity or whatever that it unleashes and all that other stuff. Like, I love the lore behind it, but the idea that there is like this race, and the race's only goal and only purpose is just to cause as much like mental and even physical anguish to like the people that encounter them. I think that that's like the craziest shit ever, because it doesn't matter which one you watch. And personally, I'm a fan of the remakes. Much more so than the older ones, just because I don't think they've aged very well, and my tastes have kind of changed. I really liked them when I was younger, but not so much now. I like the darker plots. Like, I could go for maybe a little bit more slapstick humor here and there that is like true to the source material, but I like the more serious tone like much more, because I think that it hits on like that really core fundamental like terror and dread that a lot of people feel when you think about like, you do something. Because if I watch a horror movie and it's something that I would never fucking dream of doing, like the one where it's those two girls and they climb the cell phone tower and they get stuck up there, never in a million years, that would never happen to me. I don't give a flying fuck. I'm like, this isn't scary at all. You would never catch me dead up there. But the idea that you're like
Frozen, the movie where they get stuck on a ski lift and like just
I don't ski. I don't ski, so I'm like, go fuck yourself. That's never gonna happen to me, right? Yeah. So I'm not like scared of that, but like imagining being just like a dumb kid and you find like this cool thing and you're like, this is kind of weird. Like, what is this? And you're looking at it and you're like, what does this say? And you say like 3 words and then you're just like mega giga fucked. for like the
Mm.
rest of your life, and there's nothing that you can do to get away from it. And these beings, it doesn't matter how many of them you kill, it doesn't matter how many of them you banish, they will follow you forever because you unleash this evil into the world. And like that is uniquely terrifying, I think, because it's something that anybody could accidentally do. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something that is like, there's no way out of it, right? Like you are fucked, like you are
Mm.
trapped. And it's not like you can reason with them and talk your way into like, no, I don't deserve to die, guys. Because even if we think about the Cenobites, which I would refer to as an evil race, your out is becoming a Cenobite. There is an out. There is a door that you could go through, though the door is marginally small. With Deadites in akin like demon like things, it's like, no, bitch, you're going to hell. Like that's it. You're going to get killed. That's it. There's nowhere else for you to go. And I think that that's like uniquely terrifying, like that helplessness
Mm.
and knowing that you did it as well are those two things that I think are really central to like any kind of quote unquote evil race, because it's like it's not just one, and there's literally nothing you can fucking do about it once you start it. And I think that that's quite I think that's like the best type of horror that I've ever consumed, is where it's just pure helplessness, chaos, no rhyme or reason. Shit is just hitting the fan over and over and over and over and over again until everybody's dead.
You ever read Berserk?
Fuck no, dude.
Because you're describing the Behelit in Berserk a little bit too with that, where it's this device that you can access and it grants you a wish, and those who are cursed by the Behelit are cursed by the God Hand really that come out of the Behelit. They're basically pursued by demons forever. Specifically, the main character Guts, but his whole thing is that he responds to it by picking up a gigantic sword and just chopping through every demon he can until like he gets out the other end. But there is no other end. It just keeps going and going and going into perpetually. But yeah, no, I think I agree with you on the elements that the fear of being helpless is what makes good horror. Where I disagree, though, is whether or not the demons doing that are the most interesting part of the story. I think stories like that, the interesting part comes from how much you like the human characters. One reason I love the Evil Dead series, especially because I love the human story. I love the human characters. Ash is a great character. You just kind of love even though he's a dope sometimes, you love the character. With Mia in the 2013-2014 movie, she's a recovering heroin addict. The demons that she's facing on the outside are kind of a parallel to the demons she's facing on the inside. In Rise, you have the family that's torn apart by circumstance and then torn apart by demons. It's that kind of, but they're also together, but now this outside force is stripping them away. It's breaking this thing that's precious to them. In those cases, what makes the demons so interesting is not that the Deadites themselves are inherently interesting. It's how that plays with the dynamic of the characters. And they are evil characters that are interesting and are compelling also. But, like, for example, Michael Myers, he's such an anomaly because what is this guy? Why is he the way he is? But that's less a legion and more an individual. It's a singular shape. Freddy Krueger, same thing. The mystery of why he is just as interesting early on as what he's doing. And then as you get on with the movies, you get into his backstory and his lore. The problem is when you get into this evil race, very often the problem you run into in a story like this, is that the individual there's no real distinction between the individual members of the Legion. There's no like singular big bad you gotta punch out for. Well, Evil Dead does it with the Evil Ash a little bit in Army of Darkness, but usually it's a Legion and a Horde, and there's not really much distinction in between them. Zombies, I think of this distilled. Zombies are the perfect evil, for lack of a better word, race because they are driven by pure hunger. They're not evil because they don't really have the ability to choose good or evil. They're just sort of hungry, and sometimes don't even know why they're hungry. They just need. They're a want. They're a desire, nothing more. But the problem then becomes like, well, are the zombies interesting? Not really. They're just slabs of meat you can whack but keep coming back at you, with the exception of like Day of the Dead or one of those very exceptional zombie films. There's not a whole lot of interesting elements to the zombies themselves or development for the zombies, So I think the problem there is, my question becomes, I guess to you, is whether or not the demons have traits inherent to the demons separate from their pursuit of the heroes that makes them interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I think that like the lore of like different kinds of creatures or entities that like are bad or scary or whatever. I think that that's like probably the most interesting part,
Mm.
in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's because the thing is, I think it depends. I think it really depends on how well they're written. I think the inherent trait of a demon, I think, is less interesting than how it's really written and how it relates to the characters. Um, I also think a big thing is that if the demons are just destructive or malignant, I think it's a big thing too. Because I think you can agree, a malicious demon is more disturbing than just a destructive one. I think, like, and
I
when
think
you,
it depends.
oh, I mean,
Like if you have two
yeah,
examples.
I'll give a couple examples. Yeah, I mean, again, all this depends on execution. Any idea can be done well. I want to emphasize that first. That if you come up with a good example of how it's done, then yeah, it's done well. But an example I would say would be like The Exorcist, of a more
Mhm.
malignant demon, more conniving, more mischief, more wishing to cause harm on an emotional level, just to cause
Mhm.
anguish. Like Pazuzu could just kill everyone if he wanted to. Like he has that ability, I think. But like he'd because he kills like he kills
No, yeah,
Dennings,
he'd
the
rather like
director.
fuck with them. He'd
Yeah,
rather fuck with them.
yeah, he'd
Yeah.
rather ruin their lives. He wouldn't. He just wants to watch them suffer. Um, but another example of a destructive demon would be something like, say, the Deadites we've already done. I think they're a good mix of psychological too, because they love to torture their guys. A good example would be the movie. Oh crud! I'm drawing a blank on its name. Um, Not really a demon, but kind of sorta. The Jinn from Wishmaster. You know, he's he's like a genie. He just wants to grant wishes, but he also wants to do it in a way that causes harm. He really just wants to screw with everyone. And he's such a cool character because of the actor and the performance and all that. Um, Actually, he's a really good example of a destructive demon. Actually, he kind of counters my point there a little bit. But he's also cool because he's an individual. He's not a legion. He's just the one singular guy. But his whole point is just to cause harm. Um, Again, comments here mentioning Berserk again in terms of destructive demons. Yeah, that's another great example. But there's a lot of ones that's just like, oh, we summoned a demon. Now it's got to blow something up. End of Days was the one I was thinking of with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where Satan shows up and he just basically punches Arnold a bunch in the whole movie. He goes around yelling, screaming, blows stuff up.
Yeah, I think truthfully, I think the concepts themselves are more compelling and more interesting. Only because I think that like generally speaking, the existence of or like the world building that goes into a lot of people that dedicate their time into making like an entire class or
Mm.
like race of some kind of entity or like being or whatever, like the lore that goes into creating that I always find like exceptionally way more interesting than like the thing itself because like fuck, I was just thinking of a movie. Oh, and I personally I don't even give that much of a fuck about the interactions with the characters because if you show me a thing that is like malignant and evil enough, I actually don't even fucking care if the character is a good person or not because I feel bad for like the crazy shit that they have to go through. Like for example,
Mm.
The Strangers isn't like a a supernatural movie or whatever. I
No, yeah.
fucking hate the main girl in that movie. Kill her. Do it. She deserves it. Stab her to death in front of her husband and then kill him with her dead body. Do it. They both suck. They both fucking blow. But regardless of how I feel about the characters and their development and this, that, and the other thing, what is scary about that is like I feel bad for them because these people aren't just coming into their house and killing them, right? They're fucking with them for like 12 hours. They trick them into killing their best friend. They are walking around the house and moving stuff around and writing stuff on the windows just to scare them. And the whole reason they do it is, quote, because you guys were home. That's it.
Mm.
That's fucking scary. You could do that to a character that I hate. You could do it to a character that I love. It doesn't matter. Like the lore of like the crafting of that design of a character or that kind of an evil personified thing, that is what's interesting to me because I could love or hate the person that it's happening to. If it's fucked up enough, I'm like, I feel bad for you regardless. It doesn't matter if I like you as a character or not.
So for you personally, it's more the drive of the extremes of the story. Like it's more the sense of threat. That's what drives you in a horror film. And I don't disagree with you. I'm not a big fan of the strangers. I think the human characters are very frustrating to watch. I
Well,
wouldn't
and it's like
say
all you
I want
guys had to
them.
do was hide in the closet with a shotgun, and eventually they would walk by.
There's
That's
a
all you
lot
had to
of
do.
things they should have done differently in that movie.
Yeah,
There's a lot of bad
frustrating
choices they
watch. It's
made.
a frustrating watch.
I don't revisit that one because it's just they frustrate me too much. But so I don't think they should be like I don't have as much of an extreme hate as you do about the characters, but I do feel like they're very not well designed characters, not really well written characters. But I
Sure.
agree. It's the tension of that is what drives that movie. But then movies where I absolutely hate the main character, and by design you're supposed to hate them, but you still want to see them pull through. A good example of this, I think, are some of the Cronenberg films, some of the more body horror centric films, where the fear of the self is what attacks them. But that's a very different kind of discussion of horror. I don't think we're talking about like the abstract fear of the body turning against oneself. But I think a good example would also be what's an example here? I'm trying to blank on it again. Of course, I always forget these examples right when I'm about to give them. I think for me is some movies that exist that are just so deeply disturbing, so deeply screwed up that the moment you watch it, you're like, that's unsettling. I think Martyrs is a great example of that too. You've seen Martyrs, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. The characters in that are all deeply screwed up. And the ones, unfortunately, who suffer the worst are the most innocent of them all. The ones who just kind of stumble into this awful circumstance and have no real way of even knowing what's coming until it's already pounced on them. It's a deeply upsetting film. But I think that because of what... And what's funny is that movie, the characters are barely... The main character in that, for the second half of the film, is just being tortured, like horribly tortured. She doesn't have much action that she does. It's mostly... She's a very passive character. But it's so cruel and yet also very fascinating what is happening specifically and why, that you kind of forget that this character doesn't really have much dimension. It's deeply screwed up. I think Martyrs is a beautifully terrible horror film. I think it's deeply disturbing. Or Audition, another example of a movie where the characters are all terrible, really. A lot of them are ethically wrong and manipulative and cruel, but it's still so compelling because what's happening is so specific. But again, the difference there is that these are individuals acting.
Sure. Have you seen Dead Birds?
Dead Birds, again?
Dead Birds.
I have not seen Dead Birds. No, I have not. What's that about?
Wow. When I back in the day when blockbusters were a thing, I always saw the cover for it, and the monsters on that are just fucking horrifying. And I was never allowed to watch it because it looks so scary. I was allowed to watch Jaws, but that was certainly pushing the line, I guess. And I saw Saw when I was like 10 years old, but apparently this movie was too much. But it's basically about like a bunch of dudes, and they're just like bad people. They rob a bank and they kill everybody in the bank just for fun. It's not like anybody, like they didn't just kill like witnesses, they like fucking kill everybody. And it's pretty violent and pretty gory, especially for like an older movie. It's pretty intense right off the bat. And so they run away and they're fleeing obviously, and they're Confederates as well.
Oh, great.
And so they run away and they find a house in the middle. It's an old plantation and it's abandoned. And they go in there, and there's
I know of this movie. Now you're saying it. When you said the Confederates, that's when it triggered something. It's like a haunted house film, right?
Yeah, and there's like the malignant spirits that live in the house, and it's hard to root for these people, obviously, because we just watched them like massacre all these people that like literally did fucking nothing. And then obviously, with the context that they're Confederates, and obviously, if I was a wee lad in the South during the antebellum, I don't know if I would be like, oh. Which I think that, with the historical context that we have now, we're like, oh yeah, so these guys were actually fucked up.
Yeah.
And thinking about where you're like, it's hard for me to root for these guys, but the terror and like the horror and like the drawn out like psychological torture and the fact that it's kind of like Final Destination-esque where it loops perfectly. And so it doesn't matter who goes to the house. It doesn't matter if they're good or evil or bad or neutral or whatever. It loops perfectly, so it doesn't really matter. That terror is still terrifying to me, even though the people that, got trapped in the house probably, for all intents and purposes, probably deserved to, die not in the best way, right?
Oh, yeah, no. The ethics of who gets hurt in horror films is often not relevant. It's more the idea that there's a person, there's a human being who's being tortured or horribly treated in some way. I think it's more interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
A good example also, I can just name examples all over. There's one example that I saw in the super chats that I do want to mention that I think is the best example of this morality discussion too, with relative morality. So I'm gonna just bring it up now. I'll reference the super chat when we say super chats later. But what are your thoughts on the original Wicker Man from the '70s?
It's been a long time since I've seen that movie.
Hmm. Because for those in chat who don't know the story, I'll just sum it up real quick. I'll be fast. This takes place in England. Is an isle. This inspector comes to the isle because he's heard reports of a missing young girl, and he talks to people on the island. And they belong to a neo-pagan cult where they worship nature, they worship the harvest, and the whole movie he keeps walking in on these bizarre rituals and practices that are completely against his tight upper lip Catholic upbringing. In fact, he's a virgin. It's a key plot point that this man is a virgin. Um, and he keeps trying to get answers from the town. None of them are playing along, and he realizes towards the end of the film that the girl who he's been looking for isn't missing at all. She's been there the whole time because there was never really a missing girl. It was just a report filed to draw him into the island. A staunch Christian man who chose to stay on the island, who was virginal, who was quote unquote pure by the standards of the village, because what they're going to do is they're going to take him and sacrifice them to their god to get the crops to come back. And what they do is they tie him up and they bring up to this big wicker statue and they light the thing on fire. And as he's praying to his god with this traditional Catholic, belting out this traditional Catholic prayer and screaming to Christ, all the village is just holding hands and singing and chanting, and it's like this disturbing visual of like this man clearly in horrible agony and suffering, and everyone down going like, "Yay!" It's deeply unsettling. But the movie it kind of blindsides you because the whole movie is like such a surreal trip. You're not sure where it's going. You're not sure where it's going to be. And they even made it with Nicolas Cage, and the remake is terrible with bees and all that. But because that's a good example right there of subjective morality. The movie never frames either the god of the Christian or the god of the pagans as real. It's all just how they act based on belief. God never comes down to save this inspector from this fate, but we never get any evidence that the god of the pagans is going to help them out with the crops next year either. It's very much that kind of grounded but very rooted in folklore belief system, and it's a great example of how subjective morality can really be horrifying, even if it's not evil. It's evil for this man. It's against all his beliefs, but the pagans think it's the right thing to do. They think it's good for nature, So it's very different. I think it's interesting though.
Yeah, it sounds Apostle is basically like the same premise.
Very similar. Apostles heavily,
but
Midsummer 2, I would say, is based on this as well.
And I think that like if I had to choose, because I think realistically, if I think about Apostle and I think about Wicker Man, and like I said, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie. Like I think that the common takeaway, like if you're just watching it, right? I would say that the common takeaway is that the people that are like the pagans or whatever are the ones that are fucked up. Right, especially if I'm gonna lean more on Apostle because I've seen that more recently, where it's like they have the pagan god of that was giving them harvest like chained up in like a fucking shed, and they're just like force feeding her so she will continue to provide for them no matter how much they give her. She starts to get sick or whatever, and then the ground gets poisoned and what have you. So it's like obviously we're making bad choices here. Obviously we're the bad people in this scenario. But if we look more at like Midsummer, it's like that is much more of a gray film, right? Where you can look at that and you can say like, okay, should they have burned Christian alive? Probably not. Probably not. But also, you're kind of like, honestly, like, fuck that guy. I bet that felt really good, right? You know what I mean? Where it's like, there is more gray ambiguity in that than I would argue there is for like Wicker Man or other kind of cult movies, because I can look at them and be like, these people are fucking nuts. These guys are obviously the ones that are like doing shit like way out of what would be considered like ethical bounds for what I would comfortably say is like most people. But like who has not wanted to burn their ex alive? Who amongst us? You know what I mean? Like that. I think that there is like a real ambiguity to the morality of a film like Midsummer, and again, I'm going to lean more on Apostle because I've seen it more recently. I would say that's much more gray than I would look at like Apostle, where I'm like, obviously you guys are the fucking crazies here, right?
I think it's like a spectrum too. I think Apostle is very much in the ground of these people are ethically wrong too. Like it's not just that because they're also going against the belief system of their personal world as well. Like they're acting against their ethics for gain,
Right.
which is very different. I think The Wicker Man, the original one especially, it's so ambiguous as to if anyone's right, but it's kind of framed that way where it's like you're not sure really what's going on until the very end. With Midsummer, though, it's interesting because, and they're acting entirely in faith in both stories. With Midsummer, though, I think it's really interesting if you look at it from the perspective of how cults recruit people. Because we are kind of recruited by this group. And mind you, the group is, and this is something very, that, that, the director very carefully layered into the film. There's a lot of white supremacist imagery with the cult. It draws a lot from real organizations that he studied and examined and kind of snuck their imagery into the cult's landscape, into their decorations, to subtly tell certain members of the audience, hey, this cult doesn't really believe in the things that you think they do. And like, who they kill first? They kill the people who the cult kills first are essentially either people who don't respect their beliefs or the Indian exchange students they lure into the camp, who just do nothing wrong. They're just kind of there and frightened by the cult's actions. And there's a lot of imagery there that is really clever, right? And it kind of plays with your expectations. If you know this imagery going in, you recognize it and go, okay, this cult is actually really way worse than even they're letting on, just based on this imagery that you're getting on your brain level. But Danny, right? That's her character's name. She's totally treated with empathy by the cult when she's not treated by empathy by her peers. And so she's brought in. They love bomb her at a point. They manipulate information to trick her into thinking one thing. Like she walks in on the boyfriend in the assault scene and based on limited information thinks it's like when the boyfriend's drugged and put in that situation, for her perspective she sees it as like him cheating on her, but really it's an assault. And when you look at it from the level of Danny's perspective and how she interacts with the cult, how she interacts with her peers, versus a step back and look at how the cult's operating from a real our perspective of ethics and our perspective of the film and iconography in our world, you see a very different portrait. And those two layers make Midsummer so compelling. It's not one or the other, it's both at the same time. And that's how I think a lot of really interesting films work. This is one of the reasons why I don't think Pure Evil is as interesting always, because you miss that dynamic. You miss that level of subjectivity and of, from her perspective, this is ethically good. But you also see this other angle to it. And that really makes it interesting to me personally, because there's a lot of meat to discuss. There's a lot of ideas to chew on and perspectives. And there's one way of watching the film, there's another way of watching the film. They're both equally valid, but they're both different avenues to get the meat of it, everything. I think that's why I find the discussion of Pure Evil in storytelling to be kind of reductive, because I sometimes think the most interesting part is how it affects the characters, but also how we can take a step back and look at the holistically the whole of the narrative.
I mean, I don't think that like evil races as a whole are like always suitable for like different like stories or world building or anything like that. But when they're done right, I wouldn't consider them to be like lazy writing. I would consider them actually like incredibly useful at driving like a really fucking terrifying plot. Because like if the thesis of Midsummer is like the Harga are evil, I'd be like, okay, that's like gay.
Yeah,
like why the fuck did you make me watch this whole movie? This is so stupid. But in the sense of like, you know, like a Deadite or even Michael Myers, I don't think that you could even make that kind of premise work if you don't operate on the assumption that they're evil. Like Michael Myers is just like the biggest dick in the world. Okay, cool. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. So I agree in a sense, but if I'm like when I think specifically about horror, I think like the scariest kinds of movies are that like the psychological torture or the psychological fear of things that are like they just have no other rhyme or reason other than they just want to fuck shit up. Like that kind of chaos I think is like just intrinsically just like, holy shit, like what do you even do about that? You know what I mean? But if we're thinking about humanistic horrors, I agree. If they just wrote the Harga as like evil people, I'd be like, this is a waste of time. Like, nice. Ariaster actually fucking sucks. Very cool.
Well, let me ask you a question too.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question too that kind of ties in with that, especially with the Michael Myers example. What do you think? Would you count Leatherface as evil?
No, because I think that Leatherface is like a product of circumstance. Because so like
Yeah.
the difference that I would defer because like when I think about like slasher movies and like traditional horror, I think that like for I guess I would differentiate it because Leatherface isn't immortal. Michael Myers is immortal. Jason is immortal. Freddy is immortal. Like they don't really die. They can't really be vanquished.
Mm.
Leatherface is probably one of the only ones that could actually be killed. And so I don't know because I think that you could make like an evil human character, but it just doesn't seem as compelling to me because, like I said, I think that the fear comes from not being able to rationalize or like save yourself, either with like violence or like vanquishing them or whatever the fuck that looks like. So like if I think about like even in Scream, like do I think that Ghostface is evil? No, I think they're probably just like sick and twisted in the head or whatever. But that hinges really heavily for me on them like being human,
Mm.
right? Because there is a way to get out of it. I think the terror is from like the uncontrollable aspect of it.
I think it depends on which Ghostface, I think is a good way of putting it. I think some are more vile and evil than others. Others are like clearly having a revenge scheme. Others are doing it for pride and personal gain. I think what's interesting about Leatherface especially is that in the good Texas Chainsaw Massacre films, Leatherface should be having a worse day than some of his victims. You know what I mean? Like you look at the first movie, he's just chilling at home when these kids break into his house. He does the first thing he thinks of, takes a sledgehammer and whacks them over the head with it. He has to prepare dinner for his family when they come home. But these kids, they just keep running into his house, and there's this great scene where Leatherface he kills someone and he goes down into like the basement and he just keeps pacing around the room and he looks like stressed out, like he looks like he's having a nervous breakdown, and like it's all done like through the pantomime of the acting. You don't really see his face because it's covered obviously with his leather face, but it's the idea that wow, he's having a pretty bad day too, and you almost forget the fact he just like is committing these horrible crimes.
Yeah, I think you're right. It depends on like the Leatherface that we're talking about. But I
Yeah.
think that for me, like the big pusher is like it's gonna be. It sounds like really stupid, but it's like I don't think that like with like Michael Myers, Jason,
Mhm.
Freddy Krueger, it's not like you could be like, hey man, listen, you're gonna knock that shit off.
Yeah.
It's like not appropriate. Like we're all done killing people. Like we're done doing that. I think that if you had like even if we just use like Leatherface or Ghostface, it's like I feel like there are ways to like rationalize and get out of that, right? Where it could be like, oh my god, maybe they go to jail and they like turn their life around and then they open like an orphanage for puppies or something. Like, that'd be so cool. I don't think that's fucking
Ghostface and
possible.
Leatherface opening up a puppy orphanage for
Yeah, like
rescue puppies.
right, all
That'd
things
be
are possible.
great.
If Christ tells us. But like, if you like took Freddy Krueger, first of all, you can't because he's dead. He's a spirit, and you put him in jail. I think that he would just be killing bitches in jail. I don't think that he would be like, like there's nothing there. It's not like they're not like human in their evil, which is what I think is compelling about like evil storylines is that like it's so like barbaric and just like thoughtless and like violent and disgusting that like it is inhuman in a sense, even if they are humanistic, right? They're literally not, because part of it is that they're immortal as well. But like you know what I mean? Like it is inhuman for Freddy Krueger to just like murder bitches for fun, or for Jason just to like stab every single person that works at this camp because one time somebody fucked up and was doing something when they should have been watching the lake. And mind you, he wasn't even supposed to fucking be in the lake, so half of it is his fault anyway. But you know what I mean? That's the thing that is kind of the sticking point for me.
Well, with Jason, it's interesting too because his motivations are kind of uh, there's elements that you can have that are kind of viewer interpretation of his actions because he survives drowning. He doesn't actually drown in the lake. He's just living in the woods for like years on end as like just a wandering homeless guy. He doesn't cause any harm until his mother dies, and then his first action is to go after the person who killed his mother, and then he hunts every camp counselor who ever shows up in lakes, at Camp Crystal Lake. But what's interesting is that with Friday 13th with Jason, the different actors who played him brought like more a sense of ethics to Jason in a way that's very interesting. In earlier films, I think he kills like a dog early on in one of the films, but then later on, I think it was Kane Hodder who played Jason from like part 7 to 10. He kind of insisted that Jason doesn't kill kids, doesn't kill animals, and that kind of also carried in with part 6, I believe, as well, where he doesn't kill any of the kids at the camp, which is interesting. You see a sense of almost not like a code, but like a mild ethics in terms of his actions. But he's still doing the awful murdering, so it's like how useful is that code of ethics? How far does that really extend, really? It's just interesting how like I think like some creators have tried to go, oh, he's not all evil because he didn't do this terrible thing, but he did all these other terrible things in the process. Um, Also, Jason also is, he has a learning disability. I'm not gonna-
Yeah,
yeah,
he's neurodivergent and a minor because he died as a minor, so he'll always stay a
yeah,
minor. So
exactly.
true. I mean, it's totally justified.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
100% totally. Well, I mean, in Freddy versus Jason, they try to make Jason the more sympathetic party between him and Freddy. But then again, the other side's Freddy, so it's like you really can't. it's like well, who's worse, the man who murders children or the big burly guy who who almost drowned as a kid because the counselors neglected him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a neurodivergent minor. You always have to be on his side, otherwise you're ableist. So
Mm. What do you
they
think about
they got you with that one.
what do you think about Angela with from Sleepaway Camp?
I don't really have strong feelings, to be honest. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's fair. So I feel like she's a strange case in terms of because people tend to have very strong opinions of her because of the why she is the way she is.
Yeah, I don't really have strong feelings. My preferred genre of horror is I think if I had to pick like my top three favorite movies, like because I don't even know if I have like a favorite genre. I don't like cosmic horror that much at all. I think
Mm.
Annihilation was probably one of the only movies that I liked. Um,
Annihilation's good.
but it's phenomenal.
Oh, fantastic.
I would probably say The Ritual, Midsummer, Jaws, obviously, because that
Mm.
fucks super hard. And then I genuinely like psych thrillers. And I also occasionally just like to indulge in like, like the gore porn, just kind of like slasher, like, guts and blood,
Yeah,
just kind of like fun stuff
I mean,
as
who
well.
doesn't?
So once in a
They're
while.
great.
Yeah, I didn't. That's one of the things that I didn't like about Terrifier is it was like a little
Mm.
bit too B movie esque for me. Like I thought it was fun. It was a fun movie, but a lot of people are like, "This is the best fucking crazy like gore movie that's ever been fucking made." It's so good. And it's like it was made on like a shoestring budget. Like
Mm.
it could have been better. You know what I mean?
I think for me with Terrifier, I didn't love. I liked the first one, but like it was very like I remember watching it for the first time and
It's
going like,
different, right? And it's kind of fun.
it's fun, but like the problem I have with the first one is, and I like the second one more. I haven't seen the third one yet. I want to. I haven't watched it yet. I like the second one more, even though it's like obscenely long. It could have been like a half hour shorter. Like there's so many
Oh
points
fuck!
you
It
could
drove
go.
me nuts. She was hiding for like the whole fucking movie. I was like, kill her. I was like, I'll tell you where she is. I've had enough. Get her.
Well, the entire last 40-minute chase scene you could cut down to 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Like there's so many
certainly.
false starts and false escapes and false captures. It's like just condense it to the points that actually matter. Like a lot of it felt like we were just spinning our wheels at a certain point. But I did
Mm.
like it more than the first because I liked the human story there. I like like a final girl to center the story on. Because it's not fun if it's just for me it wasn't fun the first Terrifier because I didn't it just kind of like okay they're dead, okay they're dead, okay they're dead. I couldn't I couldn't feel afraid for anyone. I couldn't care if they survived because they kept dying so quickly. They'd introduce them and kill them off. Like halfway through, all the characters are dead. I'm like, okay, what's the plot now? What are we doing for the next 45 minutes?
It's just killing bitches. That's like the whole
Yeah.
point.
And it's like kind of like, okay, we're introduced, and I know you're gonna die, so I'm not gonna bother getting attached to you because you're dead in 5 minutes. And it was like very like it felt very cheap. Whereas Terrifier 2 felt less cheap because they spent more time with the characters. You got to know them more. You got to see their internal conflicts. And that really drove my concern for them. I was more worried for them. I wanted to see them get out okay. Whereas in the first one, I'm like, okay, you all can disappear and I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. And you know who's going to survive because it's the opening scene. Yeah, I was not a fan of the first Terrifier, but I like Art as a character. I think he's interesting, but I don't like all of his movies. And I'm glad the third one's shorter, like a half hour shorter than the second one.
Yeah, it was kind of a drag to watch, but
Seriously. Ugh. And I like how they just go with extreme horror. Like I like extreme horror. I like seeing something that goes way too far. But like, you know, they aren't too many. But I think my preferred avenue with horror is the deeply psychological ones. Like I love Halloween. I love Nightmare on Elm Street. I love The Exorcist. I love The Shining. I love Hellraiser. But if you put my arm behind my back and told me to name 5 movies I'd say are the best, period, everyone should watch them. One's Jacob's Ladder, which I think is
great movie.
what? It's amazing. It's profoundly great.
Great movie.
And what's so great about it is that the quote unquote demons aren't even evil. Like they're not. I mean, not to spoil the whole movie, but they're not. You think that they want to cause harm, but really they're doing something very different. And that complicated element of it is so beautiful, but it's also frightening. Another one, Lake Mungo. which I think is
Hmm.
deeply haunting on an existential level, and it keeps shifting what you expect, and it kind of changes what you're going with it. Another one I think of as pure terror is something like Tetsuo the Iron Man, which I think is just profoundly bizarre and unsettling and strange and grotesque and ugly. And you never get a sense of what the hell's going on. Like, I've seen that movie like 5 times, 10 times. I never quite follow the plot. Like, there's always something that's like, oh, wait, I get what's happening, but not why it's happening. Audition, another one I think is great. Um, yeah, A Tale of Two Sisters is another one that's not as well watched, but profoundly haunting.
I like the American version better because I think Emily Browning is my queen. So
That's valid. I like the Korean version a little more. I think that one's really. There's that one scene in the kitchen where you see the not to spoil it, but the ghost essentially lurking under the counters on the floor, and it's like, and you see the scene from multiple times, and you never quite see what people are reacting to until the last time, and it's like so jarring, even though you've seen the scene like 5 times. Like, you know it's coming, you know what generally what's going to be there, and the way they do it is so disconcerting. Like, you know every twist in that movie. I think the American version too. You can figure out what's happening really early on if you're paying
well, to be
attention.
fair, the first time that I saw that, I was decently young, so I did not. I think that that was
Oh, there we
actually
go.
that was probably one of the first psychological thrillers that I ever like saw and like actually understood. I
Mm,
think I watched Saw for the first time when I was actually really young. I probably shouldn't have been watching Saw, but
that's
nobody
valid.
gave a fuck. And my grandpa, I watched it with my grandpa, and he was like, "I'll bet you $100 that you can't guess who the bad guy is." And I was like, "I can guess who the bad guy is." And we watched the whole movie, and I guessed every single fucking person they put on screen, and he was like, "Nope, nope, 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 nope." And then at the end of the movie, he gets up, and
Yeah.
I was like, "No shit." I
that
was like,
that that
no fucking shit, dude. You got me. And those were
same.
like the two that really got me into
Mm.
like psychological like mind fuck movies. Because
Mm.
it's like you just never really know what's gonna happen until the end. And obviously now that I've like trained my brain spending a lot of time watching this shit, I can usually pick stuff up before it happens because I watch it all the time. But when I have my wife like watch we watched The Prisoners. No
Oh,
idea. Not even a
the Hugh
clue. Not
Jackman
even a
one,
clue.
the Hugh
Yeah.
Jackman one, Prisoners.
Hmm.
Oh, that
Yeah.
one's a good. That one's really good. Yeah,
Yeah, she didn't
that's
even have a clue because I was expecting her to be able to guess what the fuck was going on. Not at all. And like the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, like I know what I'm looking for. I know kind of like the clues, the hints,
mm,
like the camera shots. Like they're gonna linger on something that's important for maybe a little bit longer than feels necessary. And I'd be like, oh, that's relevant. I'm gonna pay attention to it. Blah blah blah. Whatever the fuck. But so obviously when I was younger, I missed all those things. But now that I'm
mm.
older, I feel like it's easier to kind of navigate psychological thrillers, and that's
Oh
what I think
yeah.
is fun about them. Is like, can I figure it out before the movie's over? Right.
Well, what I love about Prisoners too is how the horror of that isn't even like, what the mystery is. It's the levels of depth the characters will plunge to get answers, even if what they're doing is like with what Hugh Jackman in that movie does. It none of it ever comes close to solving the mystery, really. But I mean, it all
No, he's
works
just
out.
pissed.
But he's just angry. He's just he's desperate for something. I think that very human feeling is what makes it so effective in the face of the mystery solving and all that. But it's like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. I love that movie so much. Um, I think another good psychological horror film is The Vanishing. I forget what country it's from. It's from the 80s.
Have you ever seen The Empty Man?
Yes. Yes, I
That
do.
movie literally mind raped me. That was one of the only ones that I could not fucking figure out. I
Yeah,
watched
no,
it like
same.
3 times and I was like, what the fuck is happening right now? This is insane. That's a really good one. And the other one is a Perfect Host. That's more of a thriller.
I
It's not
haven't seen The
really
Perfect
a horror
Host.
movie.
Well, with The Empty Man too, what was so wild was the moment that you mentioned like the idea of the mind creating something. I love how they did with folklore mixed with urban legend. I love that like parallel structure. But the moment I forget the name of the creature where it's like your mind creates it and it manifests physically.
Like a tulpa,
A
right?
tulpa. There we go. Tulpa. That's what I was looking for. The moment they introduced the idea of the tulpa, I thought it was going in a very different direction. Like, oh, we're going to talk about the cultures and this empty man monster. It's going to be just a tulpa, and it's all. And I kind of settled into what I thought the movie was going to be. And then it takes that turn at the end. You're like, oh no, wait a second, hang on. I totally missed every red flag that we have right in front of my face. That was really clever, like real good misdirection. I love that.
No, that was a really good one. The Perfect Host is it's just kind of a general like thriller. It's like a psych thriller. It's not really a horror
Mm,
movie. It's like about this dude that he's like a criminal and he's running away from the cops. And he comes by this dude's house and he pulls the mail out of the mailbox and he sees like his wife's name on the mail. As he goes up to the door and he's like, "Oh, I'm friends with Janet or whoever the fuck. Like, I'm a friend of hers. Can I come in and hang out? Like, I need to make a phone call." And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, of course." Like, whatever the fuck. And it turns out that the guy that he is trying to like bamboozle and trick, that guy is actually way more fucked up than he is. And then there's like a weird twist at the end that's pretty good, but it's well done. It's one of the early. I think it's kind of like I would say it was like a prerequisite to like the prisoners, like in a different sense, but
mm,
it's where it's like you just are kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Like this guy is arguably worse, right? Because like hypothetically in prisoners, we obviously without spoiling the end, it's
yeah.
like he's aggressing upon this guy like an incredibly fucked up way, and
Mm,
halfway through the movie, you're like. Obviously, this guy is neurodivergent and a minor. Like, why are we doing
yeah.
this to this guy? Like, what the fuck is going on right now? And then it's like, actually, hold up, wait up, rewind, press the pause button. Actually, go back and beat his ass more.
Yeah.
Hang on now. Like,
And you
back up. You
totally
know what I mean?
sympathize with because the violence being enacted on him. You don't even think about it. It blinds you to what's actually happening. You don't look at
Yeah,
the
like you don't even consider. You're like, no, he's just being a dick for no reason. Then you're like, wait a damn minute. Wait a damn minute. He should have hit him harder. Back up, right?
yeah. But it's funny is like you both know, but also like none of that was getting any closer to the answers he was looking for. But at the same time,
Well, and
it's
you're
like
so full of doubt the whole time too. You're like, if because you think about it, at least for me, I'm like, if somebody was beating my ass like that, I would just fucking say it. I'd be like, I've
oh
had
yeah,
enough.
yeah. At a
I would
certain
just say
point,
it. It's like, obviously he's not. He obviously he didn't do it. He would have said something by now. Obviously nobody wants to get their ass beat like this. And then you're like, oh
oh
shit.
wait, yeah.
Okay.
Wait a second. Well, another example of that is The Vanishing, which I've mentioned a couple times. The Vanishing, it's a very. I'll just give you the basic concept, and I won't say any more than that. There's a wife and a husband and wife. They go to a gas station, a convenience store, whatever. The wife gets out of the car, never comes back. And very early on, you figure out who is responsible for the wife disappearing. Like the film basically tells you who did it. What they don't tell you is what he did. Like you don't know if she's kidnapped, you don't know if she's murdered, you don't know if she's like off away somewhere. You don't know what's happened. And the main character obsesses not only over what happened, but how he can find out what happened. And the ending of The Vanishing, the American movie version, they remade it. They ruined the ending because they gave it more of a traditional ending. But the ending of the Vanishing is, I won't say what it is because you really should go in and watch it, for yourself. But the ending is one of those scenes where you're like, this is deeply unsettling, like profoundly. It's one of those endings where you're like, you're just left going like, wait, that's it? But also, oh my God, that's it. It's great. And if you really think about it, it gives you the answers you're looking for, but not in the way you think. It's great. Oh,
Yeah,
I love that.
I like psychological horror, but I always find myself drawn to like more carnal shit. That's the stuff
Mm.
that I always find really interesting, and obviously that doesn't really mesh well with a lot of people. I think it takes a particular kind of person to like decently fucked up horror.
Oh
But
yeah, 100%. You need the right headspace for that. Like the problem is, with this kind of level of horror, is you have to approach it with the right headspace. If you don't, then you're not going to enjoy any of it. It's going to be too much. It's going to be too little. Um, I often think I was talking to someone a while back about horror. We were talking about the most screwed up horror films we'd ever seen. I was like, I think at the time like 21, 22. So of course I was going to say a Serbian film, which was at the time the new extreme horror film that had come out. Then it was new. And I remember like telling them, "Oh, I saw a Serbian film. I think that's the worst one." I don't really think even then of the films I've seen that Serbian film's the worst thing I saw back then, but that's what I thought at the time. And the person I'm talking to, she says, "Yeah, I saw a Serbian film. I thought it was kind of stupid." I'm like, and then in hindsight, I agree with her. She was older than me at the time, but now I'm roughly the same age she was when I was talking to her. And she's like, "Yeah, I thought it was really dumb. I thought it was just violent, but like I didn't think any of the violence like meant anything. I thought it was too extreme. Like I turned my brain off at a certain point. Like, yeah, I kind of do too now. Like I think back to a Serbian film. I think while you see some of the most cruel things a human being can do, they go too far too early. Like I stopped caring. Like they show you some awful stuff in that film, and when you see it, you're kind of like, okay, whatever. after you see that scene, nothing else compares, and it shuts you down too quickly. It sucks. You just can't experience anything too frightening like that at that point. It's just too, I don't know. I think some films they go too far too quickly, and they don't know how to pace out the level of extreme violence or fear.
I think it depends because I think that like there is a pacing that's involved, but I think that like some of the best like shock gore horror I've ever seen, I would say truthfully, the top three in my opinion is Green Inferno,
Mm.
oh fuck, what was the one that I did? The Antichrist, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And then Human Centipede 2. And I think that Human Centipede 2 was what you're describing to me, but
Mhm.
every time I was like that was the worst scene, I was wrong.
Oh
I
yeah.
was wrong, right? And so even though you're like getting bombarded with like every visceral sense reaction that you could even ever possibly humanly experience or think of or fathom, it's like you're like, okay, he did the teeth. We're moving on. It's all clear sailing from here. And then he pulls out the thing for the tendons, and you're like, oh fuck! Like it doesn't matter
Oh.
what's happening. It just keeps pushing it. You're like, holy shit, dude, it's never gonna stop.
Well, I think with Human Centipede 2, what they did was they knew how to save the most grotesque scene for last, but I also think the last really gross scene of that movie I think is also like so extreme. It's kind of like the same problem I had with a Serbian film. There's a scene involving a newborn in both films, and it's in both cases it's the most extreme scene in the movie. Except in Human Centipede, it's one of the last scenes, and in a Serbian film, it's in the middle of the film. So I think
I
that
think it would even depend. I think that you can look at it too with The Witch because they do that
mm,
backwards. Because the first thing that you see is them grinding up the baby, and that's arguably the only like fucked. Well, that's not true. The crow thing is pretty fucked up.
yeah,
But like you literally open with her like making a fine paste out of the baby, and you're like, what the fuck is happening right now? And then
mm,
nothing happens for like an hour and a half, but somehow it still manages to be fine, right? I think it just depends.
right. But I think with the witch though, what they do cleverly is you don't see it. You see the baby, you see them grinding something, but you don't see like the transition between those 2 points. And I think that's how it gets away with showing you almost what you. It shows you enough that your brain puts the piece together, and you know you're
Like
ready
you
to
know
what you
what's
see.
going on, but I'm not watching it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And honestly, what you don't see might frighten you more than actually seeing it. Because I think in the Human Centipede Part Two and a Serbian film, you see it, and it's like once you see it, you're like, oh, that's horrible. That's disgusting. That's just repulsive. And I find that infinitely less scary than the suggestion of what's happening because
Yeah.
nothing you can
Because your
show me is
imagination fills it in.
exactly nothing you can show me is more frightening than what my brain can come up with, or the
I don't know,
general
man. I've
fear.
seen a lot of ISIS beheading videos. I don't know about that one.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair, I guess. But like, you know what I mean? Like, I think like in wait, what did you see a lot of? I think I missed that
Uh,
point.
ISIS beheading videos.
Oh, God. Oh no, yeah. Well, that's what was the site? Live Leak. That was the big.
Best gore. Best gore is
Oh
actually.
God, it's stuff's so screwed up. Um, I remember back in the old days of the internet. This is something that thankfully is no longer really a thing. They used to do those like trolls who would just put like war footage just all over kids forums. It was like so screwed up. But like,
I
no,
can't log into Twitter without seeing that video of that guy that beheads himself with an RPG. I see that probably like 3 times a day.
I
I
don't
know
think
it's
I've ever seen that on my Twitter feed. You may want to check your algorithm there.
well, it's because I like watching like a lot of the live updates for a lot of the conflicts
Oh, I see. I see.
because I like to keep up to date on them. So obviously, like if you click on something in all the comments, like I think it was when that hospital was firebombed because I read the news and that's what I regularly click on. You couldn't open one of those tweets without seeing like the actual recorded footage of the people that were in the building when it caught on fire, and you're just kind of like, oh, that's what we're posting underneath this without any kind of censor or anything like that. Cool, cool,
I'll
cool,
be
cool.
honest. I think I've avoided seeing that. I think on my searches, maybe I have safe search on. I don't think I've
Maybe
seen
that's what
that.
I need to do.
Yeah, you may want to get some safe searches on there because I've avoided most of that footage in a good while. No one's really posted it on my feeds too much, but yeah, no,
It's just
there's
because I get the article that pops up and I open it because usually they thread it. You know what I mean? Where it's like they thread and they
yeah.
put the link to the article at the very bottom, and like the top comment is always like an actual video or an actual picture of something, and I'm just like, sick. That's very cool.
Oh, oh,
And I also watch a lot of sovereign citizen videos because I think those are hilarious. So that probably fucks up my
yeah, that
algorithm as
might
well.
cause some issues with your algorithm. I think
Do you guys
that
have
might be
sovereign
why you
citizens in
see it.
Canada?
What was that?
Do you guys have sovereign citizens in Canada? Is that a thing?
I'm not Canadian.
I thought you were Canadian.
No, I'm from New Jersey.
Oh, that's what that accent is. I thought that you were.
I
Dude,
don't.
I love sovereign citizen videos. I'm like, I turn into like a fucking drone when I see those videos. As soon as they say, I'm not driving, I'm traveling, I'm like, taser, taser, back the blue, baby. Let's go. These colors don't run. Like, fucking blue lives matter. Get that bitch. Like, as soon as I see one sovereign citizen video, I'm like, that's it. I'm becoming a cop. That's it. Straight to
I
the
don't think I've ever
academy.
had that reaction, but I'll go with. What I watch sometimes are those Russian truck videos with the dash cam footage,
Oh,
where
yeah.
they'll
Or they're
just be
like blowing shit
traveling
up.
on, where like the driver will have no reaction to what's happening in front of him, and like there'll be like this horrible accident that happens, and you're just like, oh, well, you saw me late for work today, it's something like that, where like a logging truck gets derailed and something awful happens, and you kind of like, oh my god, are they okay? And the guy like just kind of doesn't even hit the brakes, just like swerves off the road and keeps going, doesn't even stop to check up on anyone.
Just like pops out. You're just like, oh, okay. I've seen the ones too where like people just like barely miss getting like just completely fucking destroyed by
Oh,
something, and they
and
just
no
kind of like look
reaction.
around and they
No,
just like go back to do what they're doing, and you're like, damn, okay.
like
Like, I mean, honestly, same. Like the few times that I've been like seriously hurt, I'm immediately up and I'm like, I'm fine. I'm
oh,
fine. Like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about me.
yeah, not even like a hesitation of like going like, oh crud, what the hell,
Well, I broke my rib at a bachelor party, at my
Oh,
bachelor party, actually. I broke my rib and I was like, I'm fine. And they were like, do you need to go to the hospital? I was like, nope, I'm good. I'm just fine. Right as rain. And then the next day I like couldn't move. And I was like, I probably should have gone to the doctor. But,
that would have
you know,
helped. Yeah.
when you get really fucking hurt, you're just kind of like, no, 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 I'm good. I'm good. You're like, you're psychologically tricking yourself into believing that you're fine. Right?
Well, I have a buddy. He was in the army for some time, and part of his training exercises one day, they were doing a mountain climbing thing, with the little the hooks and all that going up the scale of the mountain, and the guy behind him, they're all close together, bunched together. He tries to get the ice pick to latch into the wall, and he nabs my friend in the leg, and he has like this really tightly bound clothing, so it holds the leg together. There's no bleeding really because it's all compressed. So he's like, that really stinks, but it hurts. But I'll just finish the exercise and we'll get worked up later downstairs. Then when I get down from the mountain, they get down from the mountain. It turned out he was like a quarter of a fraction of an inch away from the main artery in the leg. Had it been like a fraction over, death on the mountainside immediately. And because it was so cold, because his clothing was so compact, he didn't bleed all that much. He bled, but it wasn't like excessive. And I mean, it was terrible for him the next few months of recovery, but in the instant he was able to finish the mountain climbing, so there's that, I guess.
Yeah, you just kind of, it's just like walk it off. Like walk it off is like such a true sentiment. If you just like get up and start moving, you're probably gonna be fine.
Oh yeah,
That's
I
usually
mean,
what ends up
granted, he
happening.
needed physical therapy and like to get back on, get back on it, but he's very close to death. Surprising, shockingly close to death with that one. But yeah, no. What's
Oh,
up?
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say
I was gonna say,
Oh, you
oh
go
no,
first. Actually, you go
no, no,
first.
no, 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 you go,
I was
sorry.
gonna say we should read super chats just to catch up on some of them, but what are you gonna say?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna go to the bathroom and smoke a cigarette really quick because I'm like gonna fucking kill myself in a second. I'm gonna go and do that really quick, and then I'll be right back, and then I can yap for like another half an hour, and then I'm gonna do one more video before Yellow Jackets comes out
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. All
because
right,
I have
well,
to watch that.
all right. So I'll read some
So
super chats and you go do your thing.
I will be right back, and then also I do have your chat open because I'm a messy bitch who lives for drama.
Oh,
And I think a lot of people in your chat could really benefit from understanding what sarcasm is. I don't know if you guys ever want to do a stream about like how to decipher sarcasm when people talk. I think that would be like a really worthwhile conversation for your audience. All right, bye. I'll be right back.
I think some folks should really watch more John Waters. I think that's where this discussion really. I feel like if you've watched John Waters, you'll be fine. For some chat. Okay, so flagellants. Okay, cool. Ed Stevens. Oh, wow, I'm really far back with these comments. Thank you for super chat. Wasn't it in the second Hellraiser movie where Pinhead said it's not the hands that summon us, but desire. When the puzzle-solving little girl patient opened the box. Yeah. So Pinhead. That's one thing with Hellraiser. Pinhead is driven not by the desire to hurt people. It's by the desire of those who wish to experience his pleasure. And that's one thing I love about the Cenobites right there. They don't just cause harm randomly. They have a code. They have order. They have structure. They're not going to do it to someone who just is convinced or used to open up the box, which is why I really don't like the later Hellraiser films, because they take away the nuance of the Cenobites and make them more boring. They become less these very sophisticated arbiters of experience and desire and pain, and they become these like boring sort of monsters of the week that just cause harm willy-nilly. They become slasher characters. I don't like that. I like them as more sophisticated, clever, dynamic. Baichi Odera, thank you for the super chat. Good horror movies make the protagonist feel helpless but is beatable. I don't know if that's always true. Sometimes they can be insurmountable. You know, like there's some horror movies where the killer and the monster is completely insurmountable, cannot be stopped, cannot be harmed, and that's very compelling stuff, I think. Baichi Odera, thank you again for the super chat. Japanese horror would argue that all supernatural beings are yokai, demons, or angels. Demons and angels will all be the same no matter what the religion. Yeah, that's also true. Or kami, or spirits, or what have you. There's a few different spirits in Japanese folklore, but yokai especially. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Saito the Deer, thank you for super chat. We got You're Gonna Be a Gay Baby from Frozen. Yeah, there you go, right there. A dim Chanel has Malcolm's individual Wicker Man. That became a comment, a poll pod discussion. I saw that comment. We had to spin it off. Thank you, a dim Chanel. Pact 1558, thank you for super chat. Question: would Am from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream be a demon for all intents and purposes? He has similar traits. I would say no, because even though he is demonic in terms of his wants and drives and the influence over the characters, he is ultimately a supercomputer. A very advanced, very perplexing, very mutated in a sense supercomputer, but still a supercomputer all the same. His anger for humanity is because he's been programmed to be a certain way, and that's very dynamic and frightening. But he also hates, he loathes, he despises. In that sense, it is very demonic. But in terms of what he is and why he is, not so much. But it's the end result that is very demonic, and the body modification and all that too. Zorku, in response probably to the Wicker Man, not the bees! Ah! Yeah, exactly. I love that line. Angels Light Gaming, thank you for super chat. There's a rewrite of Jeff the Killer that has Jeff's motives seem understandable, but he's actually just that, a killer. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, I think that when a killer is understandable in a story, yeah, like you get what his motivations are, but he's still a monster at the end of the day. I think a great example of a movie where the killer tries to share his motivations, but at the end of the day, the movie goes, yeah, for all your pontificating, you're still a monster, is The House That Jack Built. The movie focuses on this killer as he encounters Virgil from the Divine Comedy, descending into hell. And he kind of explains his works of art to Virgil, his most beloved slaughterings. And the movie's thesis is ultimately, yeah, you think of yourself as this great artist, but all you're really doing is just murdering people. You're just a monster. And for all your arrogance and all your self-congratulatory behavior, at the end of the day, you're just trash. And I love that. The film ends with that sense of like, for all his arrogance, for all his babbling, it comes right down to it. He's just going down to the pits like everyone else. You know? It's great. It's fantastic. Movie itself is not that fun to watch, but I like where it ends. I like the idea of The House That Jack Built more than the film itself, I think. Yeah, I think you're back, Malcolm. That's all the super chats on my end.
Sick. So I said for $5, the pagans and Wickermen are acting entirely on faith, though, based. And then I need to do a Sovereign Citizen stream because it's always so funny. Yeah, it's fucking hilarious. I love Sovereign Citizens. They're my favorite. They are my favorite. Maybe we'll watch some Sovereign Citizen videos and laugh at stupidity.
Oh yeah, definitely. Here's another comment from Root Jacques. I can't. I'm not Canadian or French, so I can't speak this all that well. Sorry. A thing that can't actively choices not evil. Why not? Zombies eating others is evil. They can't choices, but it's still bad in my opinion. Well, in my opinion, to do evil, you have to choose the option to do good. There's a great line in Skyrim, where this if you haven't played Skyrim, the dragons are inherently evil. They're hardwired to be aggressive and cruel and harsh. And the dragon, who's like the head of this whole order of monks, he has trained himself to be good. He has fought his evil nature to do the right thing. He has had to, and it's unnatural to his species, it's unnatural to his being, but he is hard training to do the right thing. And he has this great line where he says, what is better? What is best? To be born good or to overcome your evil nature through great effort? And that line has always stuck with me. Where even if you have the evil hardwired into your blood, you can still choose to do the right thing if you really go against everything to do the right thing conceptually. And for him, that conceptualization is the rest of society, their definition of good. The dragons see themselves as all powerful, they act all powerfully. It's a whole thing. Skyrim lore is great. I gotta really dive back into Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls again, and some of the older games. It's crazy. These maps, man, they were fucking massive, like huge maps, and later games it shrinks down. But anyway, yeah. So that's my point there. Here's a question of the orc from the guy 493. Or are the orcs from Lord of the Rings pure evil? That's a question Tolkien struggled with, because Tolkien has the same thing. He believes evil is a choice. Evil is something you choose to do. And he couldn't really square away the idea of the orcs being pure evil if they couldn't choose to be evil. Because it's kind of, the choice is made for them. So, that's a tough one. Orcs are tricky. I might do a video on orcs eventually, because there's a lot to talk about there. Not even to mention the whole discussion of the very controversial, very sloppy discussion that no one ever gets right about orcs and ethnicity, because no, orcs are not direct allegories for any one particular race of people, because orcs are not one thing for anything. Every writer has a different perspective of what orcs are. It's a whole thing. Anyway, I'm babbling too much, so Malcolm, you can take it away from here.
I disagree that on the premise of like evil being necessarily a choice. I think that it's the action that I look at that I weigh to determine if something is good or bad. I think the it's not consequentialism. It's is it utilitarianism? It's one of the two. Where I can't think off the top of my head. My brain's kind of fried. But the idea that like an action can be good dependent upon the outcome. I think that's like a shit fuck waste of time. So I would consider like actions themselves to be evil or good, and then the actor who commits them. Like obviously there's a metric of choice that I would consider. But I would say that like they're bred for evil. Like orcs themselves. Like that's like the whole point of them is they're like an evil race at least in the fantasy realm. Like that's the way that they're meant to be portrayed. So I would consider them to be evil because like that's like what their purpose is, because of the actions that they do by destroying Middle Earth. Like I'm more action oriented than outcome oriented, because my favorite example is I could pull out a gun and I could shoot Ant right in the fucking face, and Ant miraculously survives, and he goes to the hospital, and it turns out that I shot you perfectly in the face and I obliterated the tumor that you had that you didn't even know that you had. Was that a good action? I mean, yeah, you don't have cancer now. You're welcome. I just cured you. But the action that I took was evil, right? I chose to act in malice and try to hurt you, but out of that was born a good outcome. I don't think that the outcome necessarily determines the metric of how I would measure if something or not is evil, or even like the choice that goes into it, because the action itself, because maybe my intent was to cure your cancer. Maybe I knew that, but I still shot you in the face, right? That would still be the action that I would weigh.
I think that question would then become, what was your intention? I think that would define it as good or evil. The tricky thing is, good can come from malintent, but but awfulness can come from good intent as well. The path to hell is paved with good intentions, as they say. It's like, the question then becomes, when it comes to like the end result, the only thing that matters to me, if you're acting violence onto me, what matters is how does it affect me? Because because we only have one perspective on our own actions and others. But from a story, it's a little different. From a narrative where you can look in from all angles, that's where it gets a little different. Subjective morality in society becomes tricky because, the problem then becomes, in society, we've touched on this before with your earlier examples, the idea that one person has to be right and there's no other way of looking at it, that leads to imperialism, that leads to dangerous thought processes, which can lead to harm. But in fiction, it's totally acceptable to look at it from any angle because it's not real. It's stories, I think John Waters loves playing with this too. A lot of his movies, they play with morality in a way that's really fun, but it's completely just out there. Yeah, some of these analogies, Malcolm, you may want to talk to someone about. Some of these analogies are quite something.
Well, because I use extreme examples because it tests like the strength of your logic. Because
Yeah.
if I give you an insane example where you like realistically with any integrity in your body, you will know the answer without question. That's why you use extreme examples. That's why you use hyperbole when you're like teasing out the logic of someone's statement. Because if the example that I used earlier, where if we're talking about a society where when you enter a different society, if morality for the subject of the discussion is subjective, okay, let's say morality is subjective. Let's say that I agree with you. What if I went to sleep right now and I woke up tomorrow and I was in a civilization of headhunters? Would that then become morally acceptable to me, a person, to headhunt? The answer is no, because I don't think that headhunting is morally acceptable because of my morals, which I believe are divine from God. But if I step into your world and I agree that they are subjective in nature, then realistically, if I woke up tomorrow in a society where I had to chop off people's heads for fun,
that's what you mean by
that would
headhunters.
suddenly become okay, right? Because if I
thought you were
agree that
talking
it's
about,
subjective,
I thought you were talking about people who like hire people for jobs.
no,
Send you
no,
annoying
like
emails.
like headhunters, like people, like they chop off the heads of their enemies and put them on little sticks to
Oh, yeah, well, that's a little
celebrate their
different.
victories, right? Like if I use an extreme example that you certainly, with any rational thought and any good faith and integrity in your beliefs and your positions, could never disagree with, that challenges your logic. That's why I use extreme examples. It's not because I'm like trying to be funny or like trying to draw it out or anything like that, because that's how you test people's logic. Is because if I use a really soft example and you did it to me earlier, actually, and it perfectly exemplifies what my issue is with these kinds of discussions where you're challenging that subjective versus objective morality, is when I use the example of marijuana, instead of answering my question, the first thing that you brought up was the relative complex relations with the legality of marijuana. That was not what I asked. The challenge to your logic is that if things are subjective, if I find myself in a different society that goes against my morality, I ought to fall in line with the morality of that society because it is driven from society, that my morality does not matter. It only matters contextually in where I live. And that is like a thought-defeating cliche because you don't agree with that. If tomorrow Donald Trump and the 95% of America decided that rape was good, we would not begin raping, you and I, Anthony. We would not become rapists because we have a moral objection, a moral repulsion to rape and violating other people's consents. And by using that really extreme example, I demonstrate to you why your logic is flawed when you say that if I was in this society, therefore I would find this acceptable. Possibly, but then you have to eat the bullet. You have to eat the big fat fucking bullet that if you had the money, the means, and the access, if you were a slave owner in the South, you would own slaves. Because it's society. Your morality is dictated by society. And by stretching that to the extreme with extreme hyperbolic examples, that forces your hand into conceding that one, you have no morals, or two, your framework does not act in congruence with your morals. That's why I use extreme examples. So I agree with you that I am using very extreme examples, but it serves a purpose because it demonstrates the flaws in logic.
But the problem is none of those examples actually define or address my actual point is the problem. They seem
They
to,
do.
but they're not really.
They certainly do.
They really
They
don't.
certainly
because,
do.
I wouldn't say that because
How so?
in regards to the topic of law, I never said law was the defining trait of morality.
No, I never said law either. I'm talking about morality.
Right,
Where
but
does
you were
law come from?
But the problem is you're discussing laws. You want to say, "Oh, let's go to
No.
Texas where it's illegal to have marijuana."
Yes,
well,
and that's what
law.
I'm
That's
saying.
not
What I'm
ethics.
saying
That's
right
not
there
belief.
is that teases out your logic because one, laws are derived from morality. That's where laws come from.
Laws
As
are
morality,
derived from systems of control.
no,
They
laws
could be
are derived
completely-
from morality because when our morality around the idea or the concept of people of color being human beings or not, when that law changed, morality shifted afterwards. Before the Emancipation Proclamation, there were plenty of people that still did not see black people as human beings. Laws are reflective of morality. Okay, that is where laws come from. That's
Yeah,
what
but the
laws seek to
problem with that-
rectify.
the problem
And
with
so,
that train of
but
thought,
I'm
though,
gonna
is
I'm
it
gonna
was
finish my
still-
one sentence.
Oh, sorry, go
I'm
for
gonna
it,
finish
go
my
for it,
one
go for it.
sentence because what is important, and I pointed it out, and I'll say it again because you're dodging it again, and I don't know if you're doing it on purpose or not. The reason that I use the example of you live in the Middle East, are you now going to victimize like LGBT people? The answer is no, because that's your morality. The reason I use that example is because as soon as I brought up marijuana, you pivoted to the legal discussion. Because even if I go to a society where they say that cannabis is evil and you should never consume it because it's a form of divination, that is still the same principle, right? Because it has a moral underpinning to it. So that's why I use specifically the example of being hostile towards LGBT people culturally instead of legally. And then when I used a simpler example, you did exactly what I knew you were going to do, and you were going to pivot and dance and twist towards like, oh, well, legally speaking, this, that, and the other thing, because I'm challenging the logic. I'm not getting lost in the weeds with the semantic discussion. I'm challenging the logic behind your claim that society dictates your morality. And if that's true, then we're all fucked because we would all be Nazis. We would all rat on Ayn Frank. We would all own slaves. But there is a moral underpinning and a moral fiber to society that is stronger than just where you live and the cultural relevance of what the society that you inhabit, right?
But the problem with your entire train of logic there is that we're discussing things that don't actually correlate to what I'm talking about. What you're
Like what?
referring to is you're referring to the laws changing. You say the laws are derived from morality.
They are.
I don't agree. I think laws are designed to control. It's designed to benefit those who
Give me an
want.
example of a law that controls
Okay,
a current
marijuana
law.
laws. They were designed to
Marijuana
control.
laws.
Yeah, in the 20s, the marijuana laws were passed in order to control the masses. People believe.
Do you think that there's any utility in outlawing or restricting people's access to controlled substances?
Do I think of any form of control? Depending on
No,
the
do you think there's any utility in doing so? Like if I say we're going to make it illegal for you to buy heroin, do you think there's any utility in that? Or do you think I'm only doing that to control people?
I would say the control is the utility. You know, in many cases with certain types of drugs.
I just disagree.
Well, I mean, in general, I'm not talking like this. You can go on a specific case by case. Is this chemical harmful to the average person? Is it designed to restrict addictive behavior? That's all discussion right there. But that's not why they've restricted this particular drug at this particular time. It was due to racism.
Well, and this is again why I'm saying I don't know if you're doing this on purpose or not. But the semantic disagreement is it entirely serves to obfuscate my point. Because
right, okay,
what
so
you
if you don't mind me responding to your point first before you respond, that way you can give the full picture of what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
The big issue here is that you conflate law with ethics. A lot of laws are designed for the benefit of those in power.
They can be, certainly.
Most people didn't own slaves. They were abolitionists even as early as the 1700s. Slavery was outlawed in most parts of the world while America still held slaves. That connection isn't the strongest of connections. There was still a lot of outcry against slavery before the Emancipation Proclamation. A lot of laws were designed not because they reflected the morality of the times, but because they reflected the wants and desires of those in authority. We can't dictate law as a means of reflecting even the ethos of the people. Because in a republic, it's not the full people who vote on every law. It's the elected officials who vote in the laws, and they have reasons for pushing for certain laws. That's not reflective that's not reflective of societal behavior.
Sure. And so what I identified originally is what's happening right now. Is we're in the weeds arguing the semantics of the morality of this, that, and the other thing, when I'm explaining to you very clearly, and I'm going to try it one more time, and then I'm going to drop the entire line because I'm like, I truthfully can't tell if you're doing it on purpose or not. Because what I'm saying to you is that if you believe, I'm going to do a quick 1, 2, 3. 1, you believe that morality is subjective. 2, if morality is subjective, then the society that you live in dictates your morality. 3, if you lived in a society that allowed or permitted or encouraged amoral actions by your current standard, you would participate in them willingly. That is the problem with the logic. Does that make sense?
I don't see a problem with that logic, though, is the problem. And the problem also is that when you were discussing law, it was conflating that is the subjective opinions of the society.
Take the law example and just throw it out the window really quick. So you would agree that if you woke up tomorrow, you and I go to sleep tonight, we wake up in a society where it is socially encouraged and morally permissible for you to rape a woman a day to satiate your need as a man. That is culturally appropriate. It's socially encouraged. 90% of society engages in this, and it's normal. Do you rape?
No, obviously not, because
Why?
I'm not raised in that culture.
Okay, you stay in that culture for a year. Do you rape?
Probably not, because I wouldn't.
Why?
Because it's ethically against everything I believe in.
Okay,
the thing
so
is, though, we're looking at it though from the perspective of us being transplanted into another world. That's the issue.
If you were raised in a society where it was normal to rape, would you rape?
I can't speak to that because I'm not. I can't speak to that logically because I don't live in that society. Those are abstract ideas
that's the thought terminating cliches, because there is an underpinning to morality, right? There is an underpinning and a truth, whether you believe it's subjective or objective. There is a truth to morality. The transgressing against others is wrong. Okay, depending on where you draw that line, everybody draws that in a different place. But even if you were raised in a society where that was acceptable, you probably still wouldn't do it because I would consider a moral person. The same way that if I was raised in the antebellum South and I came from a rich family of this, that, and the other thing, I would like to think that I would never do that, right? Because I see humanity and morality in other human beings. That's something that I value. And just saying over and over again that morality is subjective while refusing to acknowledge that if given time and place, if you truly believe this, you would say with your whole fucking chest, yes, I would rape Malcolm. If I was raised in a society where it's normal to rape, I would rape. Because if you truly believe morality is subjective, then you would have to agree with that.
The problem, though, with your example is that even in a society like that, there's always dissent. There's no total perspective that encompasses every single person in a group. They are ethical boundaries. There's always a pushback to what is seen as the correct way of behaving. And there are many societies out there in history that have involved that behavior. You look at, for example, a lot of the medieval societies, the raiding societies. They believe that that was just a process of the raiding of the raids you'd have on villages. But even then, there was still dissent about it being ethically wrong. If you look at the folklore, you look at the legends, that's still seen as a great malice to be done. They still care about guests. Even in societies where violence was common, there's still laws about hospitality. The question becomes from all this, is it logical? Does it make sense? In these examples, yes, you're testing the idea, but what is really being tested? You're saying if I, a person who exists in a society with certain beliefs, go to another society where you have a completely something antithetical, will I just change my beliefs on a dime to fit the society around me? Well, no, because that's not where I was from. But further, most societies have a logic to them. They have a pattern. It's not just simply everyone gets their head chopped off tomorrow. It's, well, what are they trying to do? Is it because it's a hunter society? Is it because they're a warrior society? Is it because it's like Spartans that cull the weak and raise the strong? There has to be some logic to it. And that's the issue with a lot of these discussions. They're so abstract. You're kind of like, well, yeah, it's extreme, but it doesn't actually test anything. It's just like, would you do that? Well, no, I wouldn't, because that's not what I believe in here.
The extremity does test it, though, because if you have a conviction or a moral principle, you would apply that equally across every given context, and you have to be true to your own logic.
Yeah, but
that's the point of it.
But the problem is I am being true to my own logic. We're talking about, if you're talking about me personally in that situation, I can only speak to what I personally believe in based on the societal norms and also observations and counterculture. Because don't forget, every society has counterculture. Counterculture exists in opposition to the societal norms.
Yeah, and so you operate on the assumption when you're challenged that you would be the person that's morally lucky, when you're more often than not going to be.
Well, the problem also is I exist in counterculture now. So by that very logic, I would probably exist in counterculture in this other situation as well. And that still exists in conversation with the societal rules and expectations we're discussing. The problem is this example doesn't really test the ideas of the logic because it's not really grounded in any of the things I'm talking about specifically. It's talking about the extreme far end of the idea, but it's not really addressing the specifics of how society can formulate opinions, both in terms of alignment with society or in countercultural conversation with society. That's the other thing too. As well as with law, when you bring that into it, you have another element of layers. And it's not I'm not just bringing it up to change the topic. It's all relevant. You have the ideas of societal norms, the counterculture, the whims of those in power and how to maintain power, why they try to put certain people down and dehumanize others. And all of these levels exist in unison. They don't exist individually or separately. They don't exist out of conversation with the rest. They're all interwoven in a quilt of society, in a fabric. And to isolate one but ignore the rest, what you're doing is reducing the complexity of the conversation. And
yeah, because nuance like that is a thought terminating cliche. It doesn't mean anything. Because if we time travel back all the way to the beginning of the conversation, the question was, when we're thinking about evil and we're thinking about morality, you told me morality is subjective to the culture that you live in. If the thing that sparked the whole thing is if you have another entity that enters a new culture, if we have a Cenobite that comes into the human realm, we judge them on our morality. The same way, if I, as a trans person, went to the Middle East, they would treat me like a woman because I have entered their society the way that I am, and they're going to treat me accordingly, and I live and act in ordinance with their natural laws. So when you tell me, no, I don't look at that. I look at the dominant culture. I look at the culture of the entity that we're looking at. I challenge that by saying, okay, fair. What happens if you tomorrow go to the Middle East? Are you going to be the one that's pushing the gay person off the building? Oh, no, I'm morally lucky. I would certainly never. These two things exist in contradiction to each other when we're challenging the logic of a fantasy entity. Your logic is that it is subjective in nature, and we're looking at the philosophy and the morality of the society that you're entering. you can make the argument then very easily that if I go to the Middle East, I have to be super cool with them shoving people off of buildings because I'm entering their society. I'm playing by their rules, right?
That's a
That's
straw
where
man.
I
That's
was
not really
going with
what I'm
that.
talking about. When you're talking about fiction, you
I'm
look at
not.
it
That's
objectively
not what a
looking
straw
down.
man is, Anthony. You cannot try to debate me right now. You cannot do that. That's not what a straw man
You're
is.
creating an argument that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about.
I'm describing my argument. I am describing my argument. That is not a straw man. That is me describing my argument to you. That's not
Right,
what a
but
straw
the
man
problem
is.
is you're constructing an argument that's not really a response to what I'm talking about. To say
I'm not
that
making a
disproves my
response.
argument.
I'm explaining to you what I was saying earlier. Because now we're talking about the legality of weed in Mexico in the 1920s. I'm talking specifically about my logic as to why I'm using hyperbolic examples. Me explaining to you why I made that hyperbolic example and what I'm trying to determine from you and tease out with you with your answer is not a straw man. That's me explaining what I'm doing.
I follow that. That's fine. If you want to construct, if that's the argument you want to construct, that's okay. When it becomes a straw man is when it's trying to counteract what I'm talking about. Because I'm talking
No, it's
about.
not. That's not what I'm doing at all.
I'm talking about looking at fiction from an overhead perspective. Fiction, narrative structure that's separate from our own. You're talking about a hypothetical where we transplant ourselves into a specific extreme example where everyone feels the exact same way but one thing. They have a unified perspective. That's not the same thing what I'm talking about. That is where I'm calling it a straw man in this situation. That's where the problem comes in. But that being said, let's address what you're saying. From that perspective, looking at morality from the perspective of that, if it's dangerous to yourself, if it poses harm to yourself, if it's, if you're in a society which rejects who you are and what you do, and you look at that, the hypothetical person in the situation, that person still doesn't exist in the society you're entering into. That's the issue too. The person who you're talking about still exists in the society from which they came in. They're just going somewhere else. So to call someone evil or good, those are not useful terms. It's harmful or beneficial at that point, which I think is more useful to what you're talking about. What you're describing is whether or not a society is accepting or rejecting. But good and evil, that's a tougher thing to define. And it's less useful of a definition in this situation because we're more talking about immediate harm. Are you safe? Are you okay? Get out of it.
Well, the next time, Anthony, make the topic of debate, are the Cenobites harmful? That should be the topic of the debate.
That was never a debate. I said they were harmful from the beginning. That's not the
Well, that should have been because the topic of the debate was evil. That was the topic of the debate. You should have changed it then if you want to talk about harmfulness.
No, well, you brought up harmfulness. I'm bringing up good or evil. That's different.
I literally never said the word harm one time.
I said harm. From the beginning, my discussion was about the harm it caused versus.
Now you're gaslighting me. Now I'm being gaslit.
It's in the video you responded to, dude. It was from the very start of it.
You think I can barely even remember what day of the week it is? You think I remember a video that I watched of yours 10 years ago?
Valid. Valid point.
Fuck. Jesus.
Well, the idea isn't so much. Well, the thing I talked about from the beginning was, even in this video, I think I mentioned this too. The idea that harm is different. I don't think. I always said right there. You asked me at the beginning of the debate. Do you think evil is the result of action or the motivation behind action? I always said motivation. I never said it was the harm it caused. Harm is separate. It's a result. Harm is a result of action. Evil is the motivation behind the action. That's the problem. We're talking about different ends of the same process. You're looking at the end result. I'm looking at what resulted in that result even happening, the beginning.
I mean, true. So if I lovingly kill your mom, it's going to be cool. If I'm like with love and then I kill her, you're going to be like.
Never said it was cool. I never said it was cool.
Okay, you said it would be fine. It'd be permissible, right? Because I said with love.
I never said that. No, I don't think I ever said that.
But I said
either.
with love. I said with love, Anthony. I didn't mean it in a mean way.
If it's harm caused. The problem is.
I meant it in a good way. You get life insurance. Hey, that's good. You get life insurance from it, probably. That's good.
I don't think I get
that's
that.
That's a net good, right?
No, I don't think that's how it works.
What? You're not the beneficiary? You should talk to somebody about that.
I don't think I am. No.
That's crazy.
Yeah, well, I haven't really asked. The conversation of a random guy coming in to like massacre her has never really come up in conversation before. So we never got that discussion before.
You never know. I got my beneficiary set up. I'm ready to go. I got a living will. I got all that shit. You never know. I got a DNR. I got all that stuff. It's never too late to plan for the future.
We're looking at this discussion from different angles of the same perspective here. That's the issue.
I think it's because I'm a minority and you're oppressing me with your presence.
Don't think that's really the case.
Are you mansplaining to me right now, Anthony?
I haven't mansplained anything yet.
I think that I'm being mansplained to. I think that wow. I expected more. Honestly,
don't really think that's the case there.
I expected more from my favorite ally. That's really.
I'm sorry to say.
Oh, good heavens.
Oh my god. I think people took this chat way too seriously in the conversations, though. I think the comments there.
No, I mean, like the thing is, I love a good blood sports.
No,
I
same.
love blood sports, and I love a good. I always like, and I mean this with my whole heart, and I hope that you can understand that. Like, even if I'm being like kind of a dick, I'm doing it in a lighthearted way. Obviously, like I obviously don't think that like you're a fucking idiot or that you're a bad person or anything like that. I love rolling around in the mud. It's my favorite thing in the entire world. But I don't have any ill will. Like I've argued with people that I fucking hate, but afterwards I'm like, hey, like thanks for talking to me. Like, still had a good time.
I
So,
wouldn't
I mean,
agree to this debate
no
if I
ill
thought
will.
anything less. I'm on the same page on that front. My methods are a little different, but I do enjoy this as well.
I miss blood sports. I miss the old days of Twitch politics. I miss it dearly. So whatever I get close enough to it, I'll take.
There you go. No, 100%. No, this has been fun. I enjoyed this. I enjoy as vicious as something got. I enjoyed every second of it.
And no ill will. Obviously, everything.
No,
is peace and
100%
love,
no.
including me coming to kill your mom. I'm just kidding.
Well,
I'm
I'm
just
more worried about the
kidding.
bricks that Crim threw against my ceiling. That's going to be a problem. I had to repair it anyway, but now I got like who knows what else is in there. Although that being said, though, if Crim ever comes back, did the bricks have a chainsaw? 'Cause I'm hearing like a buzzing sound overhead. You know, it's weird. I'm hearing like whole beams shifting overhead. I'm not sure that's really how it works.
But you haven't even considered that Krim is Canadian, so that's actually good in his society. Like that's just what they do, you know. So like you're coming at it from this perspective where he's looking to harm you, but he's actually trying to help.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah, it's all perspective, isn't it?
There you go. It's all a matter. I mean, he is a demon, so it all works out.
Hey, true. There you go. So listen, maybe it's Krim you need to watch out. Maybe you need to tell your mom to watch out for him. Maybe that's.
Yeah,
that's
but
where we
like,
are.
why would anyone want to come to America in this point, at this day and age, right now, especially from Canada?
What are you talking about? Cyber trucks? Come on, man. Those are so cool. They're so if you catch on fire, you can't get out of them, and the first responders can't get you. That's so cool. That's awesome.
I love vehicles that can explode and the doors lock when you're inside of it, and you just can't get out, and the windows are designed to be unbreakable. I love that. Great.
I think it's a really
choice.
good idea. It's a really good idea. Truthfully, I really like that.
Oh my goodness. I do love freaking death machines.
I also love $20 eggs. Like I'm having a really good time. I don't know what everybody's complaining
Individual eggs. 20 individual now. What are you talking about? Cartons? No, forget it. Each
Yeah,
one's
it's
20.
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I'm having a great time. Like if Trump could run for a third term, I'd vote for him again. I would. I love overpriced groceries. I really do.
Nothing quite like being unable to fill up your tank with gas.
You should try driving a truck, Anthony, and then tell me about building up your gas tank.
Oh, I buy the least fuel in my car to spend the least, not because it's like good for the environment. I do it because I don't want to spend money on gas.
I finally got a truck. Bad time to get a truck. Very bad timing.
Yeah, your choice and your timing was a little off there, I think.
You know, as they say, country girls make do. So
there you go. But no, yeah, this was a good conversation all around.
I'm always happy to yell at you, Anthony.
That's all
Always happy.
good. It's all good. Yeah. So I think you said you have like you wanted to watch your thing. I'll just jump in my chat and talk bad about you behind your back to the chat.
I'm really excited. I love that. I'm probably gonna have people send me clips later, and then I'm gonna complain about it on my stream.
Oh, 100%.
And I'm gonna be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this bitch said that. Oh my god, that's so crazy. Somebody tell me where his mom lives."
Oh, we go New Jersey. It's the land of good bagels and actually that's not.
I've always wanted to go to Jersey Shore. So.
You know what? Overrated, I'd say. Not as good as you think.
It's about the nostalgia. DJ Pauly D tours a lot, and I really want to go and see him. Not because I am particularly fond of his music, but just because I think it'd be funny, you know,
Yeah,
just like for the meme.
it's all good. We have what do we have here? The Jersey Shore is all right, but we have there's some good beaches, some good island fronts, but most people here want to go to Florida for the beaches apparently, which is wild to me. I don't know.
You know, that happens.
Ugh. Anyway,
I will let you crash out. Really, really cool of you to verbally abuse a minority for a couple of hours. That was really cool of you.
It's all good. Hey, listen, anytime you want me to verbally abuse you, it's all right with me. So
that sounds kind of kinky. So I'll have to think about
that. All right, I'll catch you later. All right.
All right, later, dude. Have a good night.
Yeah, good night. All right, now chat. I haven't left yet, though. I'm still here. You're still stuck with me. I haven't turned off the stream yet. Let me close that off. All right, I think that went pretty well. I think that went very reasonably well. We had some good rational discussions all around. There were no hyperbolic examples. Different perspectives. That's what's important. Okay, yeah, chat's now blowing up. Now that the conversation's over, people are like going nuts. Let me read a few of these comments. I've been keeping an eye on chat, but haven't, for obvious reasons. Definitely was more focused on the conversation than anything else. So let's take a look at some super chats that have happened since we ended the discussion. Oh, cool. So here's where I left stuff off. Pact1558, thank you for the super chat. Highly recommended the CRPG Tyranny. The whole game is about the villain having won, and you are his Judge Dredd figure. Tackles the different kinds of evil. I like that, though. It's conceptually really cool. Yeah, this is the after party now of the debate. Let's talk about it. Let's unpack some things, and let's go from there, as well as notes for what to keep in mind on Tuesday when we confront Manga Common. If my parents watch this stream, I am sure they have also sent me many text messages asking what the hell was going on. So we got that going for us as well. Because, oh my God, some of those examples were pretty extreme, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Tell them not? No way. Mild Crisp, thank you for super chat. Showed up a bit late to the stream, but when I heard the topic was horror, I immediately thought of Jason Takes Manhattan. Lol. Jason Takes Manhattan is the worst Friday the 13th in my opinion. My problem is with Jason Takes Manhattan is it's the weakest. It's the most. They aren't a lot of good because they had to censor it so much because the makeup and the effects were too extreme for the MPAA with Part 7. So they deliberately went low key with this one. I think that the fact they didn't use didn't try to pretend it was New York City more was a problem. I feel like the city setting you could fake it for a bit, but the 2/3 of it on a boat that really threw me off a lot. Mr. Nemo, thank you for super chat. Is Fravin racist to think that all demons are evil? To me, not taking her seriously on her experience with demons is extremely foolish and dangerous. Well, the demons in Fravin are more like predators. They're more like animals pretending to be people. And when that's an oversimplification, yes, but they're more willing to do harm. They're more interested in causing harm. They're not really there for the interest. They're not really there as moral people. They're not people. They're like snakes pretending to be people, and that element is really disturbing and frightening. But I don't think it's racist because they're not really racist against anyone. They're just a concept. It's not like they are. They're like sharks with masks on their faces, essentially, or rather like the sharks from Jaws. Real sharks aren't as harmful. Baichiapio Dera, thank you for super chat. Most laws are derived from cultural apprehension and from societal needs, not from morality. Agreed. And a lot of laws are also from the desires of those who make them, the wants of those who get elected or who rule, very often. Root Jacques, thank you for super chat. If things change tomorrow, you would be the same person. If Anthony and Malcolm grew up in this past, they would be completely different people. We don't know what lives they'd have led. They'd have nature versus nurture. Yeah, that's the problem with that whole line of conversation. It's to say you're transplanted in a different location, well, that's a different person. You're no longer the same person you are, so you can't see yourself from that perspective. Now, as a writer, what you can do is look down at the historical period and go, okay, here's this era in history. Here is what they would do. Here are the norms they have. You build someone up from the ground up, but you still write that from the top-down perspective of your own morality. That's why that line of conversation is very useless. You go in thinking, okay, here is my morals, here's my perspectives, here's my thoughts. Let me transplant them into this work and use that as guidelines to my own work. Even people who try to be amoral with the history and try to write from the perspective of that era, even then, sometimes that problem still comes up. And very often, to boil it down to, everyone does this one act of violence, is that cool? That's a little reductive. There's a lot more going on to it than just that. Kippy, thank you for super chat. Life is nuance, and trying to reduce nuance from discussion of how you navigate life is putting on horse blinders to not confront ethical challenges. I agree. That's the issue. You can't really divorce yourself from all the elements there. Oh, Malcolm's missing in Discord. I gotta look in a second. Angels in Gaming, thanks for chat. I wish Malcolm would warn about that though. I don't know what you're referring to exactly there. Let me take a look right there. Please answer on stream how you feel if you didn't eat breakfast this morning. Okay, so Malcolm's asking me on Discord. Answer on stream how I would feel if I didn't eat breakfast this morning. Well, the good thing is, Sai, I didn't eat breakfast this morning. In fact, I didn't have any food until lunch. So there you go. I forgot to eat anything all day long. So there you go. Did I miss it? Yeah, you missed the debate, but don't worry. You can always come watch the VOD. It's pretty wild. I'm just mad you didn't mention a single Mike Flanagan thing. Yeah, it was tough to bring up, I think. Mike Flanagan would have been very difficult because his whole perspective is extreme empathy towards his characters, even his villains. Like real strong empathy towards all the characters. So that would have gone a long way. Catholic and trans mask, like pickle. Oh my goodness. What a debate, right? All right, let me take a look at a few of these. Oh, God. Oh, Malcolm was in chat. I see. Quick, Anthony. Yeah. How would you feel if you didn't eat breakfast this morning? Yeah, I would feel fine. I feel roughly the same as usual. I usually forget to eat breakfast, actually. Looks in good terms. Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm on good terms with everyone. Listen. The reason I challenged Malcolm to a debate was knowing he'd give the extreme examples, knowing he'd be hyperbolic, knowing he'd be, pushing the buttons that need to be pushed. It needs to get done. You need to be challenged sometimes, and you need extreme examples to push you. I think I did pretty okay. I think he did pretty okay. I think all of us could do better, obviously. But, hey, listen, you need that kind of thing to push you. And, in hindsight, you can say, oh, I should have done this differently. Oh, he should have done this differently. But, hey, in the moment, it all works out. That being said, though, Malcolm's style, shock. It's meant to shock you into something. It's meant to see. A lot of people in chat were not prepared for Malcolm to shock you, I think. A lot of people were not ready for that. I knew what I was getting myself into because I know his style. He tends to be very hyperbolic. He tends to say a lot of things that are very extreme. And so some people in chat were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he said that." Like I knew he was gonna go there. Yeah, no, the Middle East stuff I have an issue with. I didn't like that line of questioning. I thought that was very reductive, personally. But I can't. I think with that discussion, it's designed to shock you into a sense of, okay, what do I respond to first? It's meant to overload the senses. It's meant to be overwhelming. I don't think that's super productive necessarily. I think personally, I think that the shocking element is like, and plus the whole thing also with the Middle East is that thanks to Project Ajax, most of the beliefs in the Middle East are because we instilled tyrants there. Like a lot of those ideas were manipulated by our society. The Middle East was a very progressive state back in the 40s and 50s. It was a very different place than it is now. America and Britain went in and this isn't like a conspiracy. This is like public record. It's well documented that Project Ajax was a mission to depose the Soviet sympathizing democratically elected leaders of, I think it was Iraq or Iran. It was either Iran or Iraq, and replace them with a dictator, essentially, who was sympathetic to American and UK causes, to create an ally there. And that led to many of the problems that we face there, because we intentionally destabilized the country, allowed oligarchs, essentially, oil barons and all that, OPEC, to kind of become all-powerful there, because it was a weak government, or in some cases a strong government, or a fascist government, how you define it. And we created what the destabilized situation is there. And it's not like hidden. It was public record. It was reported in newspapers. It was not a secret government project. It was there. You ever read Dune? Dune's a response to it. Arrakis, you ever wonder what Arrakis sounds like? It sounds like Iraq for a reason. It's designed after Iraq and the way that other foreign powers played in this desert that was not, a whole country essentially for their own personal profit and money. So that was one where I'm like, okay, let's back up here. Hang on a second here. Some people would call that gish galloping. I call it, wait a second. Let's actually take a step back. There's a lot of stuff you're saying. Let's actually break it down. The problem is sometimes with the extreme example, and here's where I think You can get lost in the sauce sometimes. If you thought an extreme example, and you're the kind of person like myself who assesses everything, going, okay, let's look at all the nuanced pictures here. You kind of go, hang on a second, let's look at this. Let's see what's going on here. That's the issue. But the concept of the extreme example to test someone as like a big stopgap, that's different. That's a big different situation there. But yeah, no. And yeah, I think, honestly, looking back at the video, there's a ton I would do differently. What I want to do this year is go back to a few concepts I explored in previous videos and kind of not redo them, but kind of do a new take on it, Because even from year to year, your opinion shifts, and you got to grow and adjust. I think the idea of evil as result, I don't agree with. I think that's not really the way I see evil. Evil is not action. Evil is in the soul. It's in the spirit. The evil's in here. There's the famous John Carpenter scene where he goes. It's a thing he said in a bunch of interviews over time, where he describes the two types of horror stories out there, and he says, in his scenario is you have like the tribe, right? They're all sitting around the fire, and the sage, the medicine man, what have you. He comes up and goes, I have seen evil, and I know where the source of evil is. And he points to the darkness outside the fire and goes, it's out there. The other tribe neighboring us, they're the evil. The wilderness, they're the evil. We are good, and they are bad. That's one type of story, as John Carpenter says it. Take everyone around again, the fire. Same scenario. You have the tribe sitting on the fire with the medicine man. He comes in and goes, I have seen evil. It's in here. It's in the heart. It's in the soul. We are the evil. We bring it with us wherever we go. That's the second kind of evil. I very much believe that both are equally true. They are dangerous people outside your group, yes. But never forget you carry with you the spark of danger, of evil inside you at all times. That's the Italian Catholic guilt coming, though. That we are carrying wickedness and darkness inside of us at all times. And it is only through knowledge of that and through great effort that we're able to go and do the right thing. And that's what I think is so important in life. But yeah, let's take a look at some more comments. I want to hear what you guys thought about this debate. Because I can yap all night. As you very well know, I've done 7-hour streams. But let's look at what you guys thought. Because I want to make sure I judge according... Oh, did this freeze? Did the whole thing freeze? No, we're not frozen. We're good. Oh, yeah, I think my end just crashed. 1 second. Oh, there we go. We good? We good? We lose anyone? No? We're still alive? Excellent. Perfect. Yeah, my channel froze for a second. I didn't see any comments for the last few bits, I think. Let's take a look right here. Malcolm's on Discord, yada, yada, yada. Okay, cool. So my end just froze up a second. Hope we're still all here. Let's take a look at some comments here. Let's look at what you guys all thought. You got challenged too, to be fair. Yeah, 100% I got challenged. It's important to get challenged. You want to get challenged. You want to be pushed, You want to be held on the ropes. If you can't defend your ideas when on the ropes, then what are you actually defending? What's the value in... how valuable are your ideas if you can't defend them, That was using potentially triggering examples. Yeah, that was also fair too. I think some of the examples were a little triggering for a lot of people. And I can't speak to my comfort levels. I have a pretty wide level of comfort in terms of what people can say. But I understand that people were not expecting that level of intensity probably in this chat, because I usually don't like going that far, personally. Malcolm goes that far. I'm not a fan of going that far. But so for some people in chat, they were probably really taken aback by that, and I apologize for that. But for the sake of debate and in sake of conversation, sometimes if you're arguing a point, you gotta be pushed, and you gotta be pushed publicly, If you can't defend your ideas under fire, what's the point of defending it? All right, what about the episode of Red Dwarf Justice? Oh, man, I haven't seen Red Dwarf in ages, so I can't speak to that one. I'm very sorry. I have 4 stingers ready. Looks like good terms. Yeah, Malcolm and I are good terms, I would like to say. Baichi Yodera, thank you again for the super chat. True evil is not letting yourself understand other points of view. Yes, 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 yes. And that is a key element as well that I was having an issue with. I didn't articulate it well enough in the debate, I think. That's a fair point. But I think that one element that's important, I think in hindsight I would do differently, is focus in on the idea of ignorance, right? To ignore, to not engage with an idea that's present. If you choose not to engage with an idea, then that sometimes is more dangerous, not refusing to understand it. I mentioned it a couple times with imperialism, with cultural imperialism. I should have just said cultural ignorance, reductiveness. A good example of this. You've probably heard this story before, but I'll tell it again. There's a missionary. This is back a few years ago. And there's an island, I believe, off the coast in South America, I believe it was, but I might be mistaken. It's a remote island. The population there are highly aggressive to outsiders. The government just lets them take their island. They're like, you know what? You're a protected people. You're a tribe. You're indigenous. Just have your island. We won't bother you. We won't even get close to you. Just stay there. Because they're extremely violent to outsiders. And this missionary guy goes, I'm going to bring Catholicism to this island. I'm going to go there. I'm going to spread the good word. And he goes there, and a fisher boat brings him there. And he's cannibalized. He's devoured. They swarm him and eat him. This is after they throw arrows at him. They try to throw spears at him. They give him warning. Hey, listen, don't come here. We don't want you here. But he's devoured when he gets there. Disappeared. Not a trace of him left to even bury. And, his ignorance was what caused it. He was proud. He was arrogant. He brought his own arrogance that he could be different to this island. He thought he knew better than all the other people who said, listen, just leave them alone. Let them stay there. And, that's what happened. He pushed. He didn't listen. And to his own doom, essentially. But were the people there evil? I'd say no. That was their way, They don't want people there. They're very isolated. They're very different. You can't act like you're better than anyone else. You can't impose your beliefs on someone, You really can't. You can explain your beliefs to listening parties, but you can't force it on someone else. That's imperialism. And what the missionary was trying to do is a form of imperialism. He should have known, but he also should have known, hey, you're not going to get anything out of this. These guys are dangerous. They're going to hurt you. So it's a bad decision all around. I wouldn't say anyone was evil. I'd say, hey, don't go there. You know what I mean? Listen, if everyone tells you don't go to the island full of cannibals, you don't go to the island full of cannibals. That's what it is. Don't go there. Don't act like you're going to do differently. Don't act like you're going to be the exception. You're not. It's pride cometh before the fall, I guess. It's a very dangerous game to play. You don't play with fire. Saito the Deer, thank you for Super Chat. It was a little funny trying to watch you and Malcolm displaying the two different styles of Catholic debate. Yeah, exactly. Well, the problem is that my form of Catholicism is the Catholic guilt side, where, again, it's the evil is out there, the evil is in here. From my perspective of Catholicism, every single person is capable of doing something greatly terrible. We're all capable of doing something bad. Yeah, I'll go to the island of cannibals. Don't do it. Just to stay away from there. You're better off. There's no good that can come from it. Like, the evil's inside. The trick is not, and I'm not saying that I'm evil or anything like that. We all have, everyone, evil, I think, too. I made a mistake with one other thing. There's another case of what evil is. Evil is taking the easy way when the hard way is better. And what I mean by that is this. There are ways of how people cut corners in society, right? They cut corners, and those cut corners result in harm. They hurt people, Decisions people make sometimes can put others in harm's way because it's easy, It's the easy choice, and that easy choice can sometimes lead to harm to others. And you can think of it like the construction job that cuts corners and leads to the house falling apart, or the oil pipes that are shoddily made, or decisions made with plumbing that results in lead coming in the water. Something like that. I don't think it's malicious, but it's an evil of laziness. Or apathy. Really, apathy is a big source of evil, in my opinion. Indifference to the suffering of others, and how your actions can hurt them. The consequences of your actions to other people. That's a whole thing too. And that's a part that doesn't get talked about as much. The evils of convenience versus hard work. Because everything worth doing is hard work. You look at James Somerton, right? I was just thinking about that the other day. He could have written his own scripts just as easily. He had a writer that worked with him, who could write with him, but he took the easy way out by stealing other people's work. That's the evil of taking the shortcut. By Chiapio Dara, thank you for super chat. Yeah, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Yeah, 100%. That's the issue there too. Or the one, in this case, We have an equal capacity of good and evil, I think. I agree. And don't ever forget, you are just as capable of good as you are of harm. We are capable of doing great things as well as bad things, equally. It's your choice that affects that. You choose the right choice, and things will go well, hopefully. You choose the wrong choice, things might go well for you, but be very bad for someone else. And that's not as good. That's really rough, actually. Nietzsche would agree on apathy. Yeah, Nietzsche was onto something there. He knew the harms came from indifference, that requires nuance, apparently a thought-terminating thing. Yeah, apparently so. That's why John Hammond is the villain of Jurassic Park. Yeah, exactly. John Hammond is the bad guy in Jurassic Park because he saw the easy way out. He just built dinosaurs in the park and didn't bother to put restraints or understand how they functioned. He just dumped the dinosaurs in there and went, yeah, go crazy, go wild, Yeah, again, hair splitting matters. Hair splitting is very important because people want a fast answer. Yeah, the debate just ended. The debate wrapped up a little bit. It was too good, though. I love how Citrian your thoughts are. Yeah, valid, right? Again, all of this is all hypothetical anyway. I think the problem is when you conflate real life with, fiction. You can't do that. Fiction is fiction. It's not real. Fiction, people in fictional stories aren't real. They aren't. You can't talk to them. You can't exist with them. They're fake, Yeah, also Darth Vader. You can sympathize with him. He's a tragic character. Still the bad guy. Still commits, horrible acts of genocide to the Jedi. But not real. He's not a real person. You can't hang out with Darth Vader, He's fictional. The righteous gemstones. That's pretty funny, actually. Not gonna lie. But yeah, no. It's Darth Vader killed all the people. Yeah, exactly. He killed a couple people here and there, a couple here and there. Yeah, so boomer wife jokes, exactly. I don't really think it's funny to joke about being violent to women, actually, because of our cultural context. It feels screwed up. Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's really screwed up. I think I kind of, in those situations, you hear that and you go, okay, here's the shocking joke that's meant to make you get uncomfortable. It's meant to get under your skin. I don't think he means anything by it, but at the same time, it's it is deeply shocking, that kind of humor. There is, especially as time goes on, certain jokes just don't land as well. Have you read Nausea? Nausea. That sounds familiar. Why do I know that name? Nausea. Malcolm came up with a hentai plot. Yeah, Malcolm came up with a hentai plot. Yeah, exactly. Anthony, would you hang out with Darth Vader? No, I wouldn't. He would terrify me. He was a very scary guy. Darth Vader is frightening. If you met Darth Vader in real life, he'd be frightening as all hell. He's cool in the movies, but when that silver screen stops dividing you from him, it's like that scene in Rogue One where he just goes to town with the entire hallway of rebels. It's not good. Yeah, everyone's different. Everyone's in some ways distinct, and that's important. All right. So I'm going to wrap up tonight, I think, very shortly. I do want to do some shilling, though, for the end of the night. Uh, Big heads up, especially. We got Snow White coming tomorrow with 2 different thumbnails here because I am A/B testing more and more. But yeah, this is gonna be fun. Tomorrow's Snow White video is gonna be something. It's gonna be real something. We're gonna be talking about the new Snow White movie from Disney. We're gonna talk about the bizarre hatred that the internet has for Rachel Zegler, which I think makes no sense to me whatsoever. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and it's gonna be cool. Now, next week, I have 2 streams planned, but I do not have a video planned for next week. Might do a small thing, but nothing big. Because I'm going to be hard at work at my massive project I'm working on. I'm working on it for a couple months now. I really want to wrap it up and show it to the people I interviewed to make sure they get their perspective on it, their views on it, so we can wrap things up and move on from there. Manga Comment, I think. I've been talking to Manga Comment too. There might be some bits that we get heated on, but I don't think any of... but Malcolm has shades of the shock jock in him, you know what I mean? He says the things that make to shock you and jolt you. Kind of like the Howard Stern perspective. Manga Comment is not in that vein. His style is very different. I also have a stream planned for next Friday. Not a full video, but a stream where I'm going to be talking with some different YouTubers. I want to confirm that they're still involved, but they're 2 people I have never collaborated with before or ever discussed publicly with before. But they're both really cool people, and we'll be going there. Okay, right question, Anthony. You're a big Ava nerd. Have you ever watched the online horror series Midwest Angelica? Oh, I don't think I have, actually. Is that good? I might take a look at that. Midwest Angelica. I keep saying Alexandria for some reason. Angelica. I might take a look at that. I'm curious now. Yeah, I don't think Malcolm would say something as shocking as Malcolm. Yeah, no, Malcolm likes to push buttons, is what it comes down to. He likes to push your buttons. He likes to say something that shocks you. Again, in a lot of ways, and this is tough for people who I think haven't really, because I've grown up with shock humor. You know, I'm used to it. There is a sort of John Waters-esque quality to some of what Malcolm says, where it's like this extreme intense thing designed to like rustle you and like shake you a little bit. And if you know that going in, you can deal with it. You can swing with the punches. If you don't know it, I can imagine someone being like a little overwhelmed there, I think. Yeah, no, so far, now again, like with the Malcolm debate, I have been talking to Manga Comment leading up to it. And we've been talking a little bit. What we've been looking at is how our audience has responded to both sides of the challenge. Because both of us, we don't want our audiences to like get each other's throats. We don't really want that. So I want everyone to be on their best behavior. It sounds like a parent talking to kids. I'm so sorry. You'll be fine. I trust you'll be okay. I don't want anyone to be jerks to Manga Comment. I don't want anyone to be jerks to Malcolm either. I don't want anyone like harassing him. I don't want anyone like being mean spirited to him, even if you disagree with them. Because I think like it's important to be civil in these situations. But yeah, I'm expecting a more chill stream, I think. Will you collaborate with Razorblade? I don't know who Razorblade is. I'd have to look into him or her or them. I'm not sure. Yeah, Common's interesting. Common, so far, I get the vibe he is... Won't bother going to God. Yeah. To quote Frederick Crudson, don't tap the glass. Yeah, exactly. Don't treat, or don't touch the poop. In other words, that's what a lot of people say with Lily Orchard. They say they don't touch the poop. That's what Krim says all the time too. I don't know where that comes from, but it's a term of phrase, I guess. I think it'll be very interesting. It'll be very focused, I think, on specific media points too. And I think with the Manga Comment debate, since it's been built up more, There's going to be a lot of opportunity for questions on both sides. I'm really excited. Get on with it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so Down the Rabbit Hole had a really good episode. Have you guys seen that? Down the Rabbit Hole? They did a video on he did a video on Dwarf Fortress. Have you seen it yet? It's really good. If you haven't seen it, on the Murder Boat saga of Dwarf Fortress, which is just one of the most iconic bad case scenarios of a video game collective. It's really interesting stuff. Anyway, Boat Murdered. I'm sorry, Boat Murdered, not Murder Boat. Boat Murdered. I'm so sorry. Got it backwards there. Boat Murdered. Murder Boat. Wow. That's the, I think that's the plot to School Days, Murder Boat. The end of School Days is Murder Boat. Boat Murdered is Dwarf Fortress. Yeah, but it's good. It's a really good video. I think you should all watch it after this. Now, I do want to direct some of you all to another performing thing. I don't want to have this go off and just vanish. So I'm going to redirect you all. Let me analyze this real quick. Who's streaming right now? Who can we raid? Let me see. 'Cause I haven't done that enough. I haven't done enough raiding yet. That's not what I'm looking for. Where is? How did I do this originally? Because I know I've done it before. Oh, customer here we go. Redirect. Here we go. Redirect. Let's see who's live right now. Nosferatu on Shout. There we go. That's a good thing right there, isn't it? Any of my friends streaming right now? It's just a lot of the Shout Factory things. They're doing a lot of streams. No, I don't think there's anyone which of my buddies are actually streaming right now. Let me check real quick before we go. Let me see if there's an option to get you guys. Oh, I know. I'll send you to. 1 second. Let me take a look at this. It'll be fun. So I'm going to send you to. Can I? He's not going to let me redirect. Okay. Here we go. I know what to send you to. 1 second. Here we go. Here we go. I know who to send you to. Okay, cool. So, we're going to wrap up chat. I want to send you to a place coming right up. And, yeah. So, everyone, thank you so much. Let me see words. See if they left any super chats here. I clicked away for a second. All right, cool. So, chat, I am sending you to another stream. Get ready to raid, all right? And tell them I sent you. I'll be there too, I think, for a little bit anyway. All right, everyone. Take care.